Oh man, what are we gonna do? Hey, Hamster!
Jeez, do you have to keep bursting in here like that?
But the fans have high expectations for Metroid making the big jump to 3D, and I have zero ideas!
So what? Just do what we always do.
But how are we supposed to recreate what worked before, but in a brand new perspective?
Oh shoot, you're right. Can't we just put it off?
We already skipped an entire console generation, we can't do that again!
If you keep this up any longer, I'm gonna strangle you.
Don't ruin the illusion!
I'm the one who edits these videos.
I'm so sorry!
Stop doing that!
If you can believe it, I first found Metroid Prime to be cool, but nothing outrageously amazing or anything. I kind of fell out of my first playthrough somewhere around the Phazon Mines.
I admit to being an uncultured swine.
A few years later, I gave it another shot, and by then I could better appreciate the atmospheric world and brilliant innovations that reimagined Metroid in the third dimension.
It's safe to say that growing past my younger ignorance in game design, I now see Metroid Prime not only as a monumental work of art for the gaming industry, but also one of the greatest video games ever made. Spoiler alert, we like this game a lot, and here's why.
Prime is effectively Super Metroid in 3D, but the crazy amount of gameplay hurdles the devs needed to solve to make that 2D to 3D jump even happen effectively is what makes it so astonishing.
Metroid Prime is a 3D action puzzle platformer with first-person tank and lock-on aiming controls. This departure alone was to blame for so many players, myself included, feeling uneasy about this new direction at first glance. But after playing it, I couldn't imagine Prime any other way. With a third dimension, level design and puzzles could be far more complex than before, and the open alien world could be better constructed with overlapping floors, interconnected secrets and passageways, an incredibly useful 3D map feature simplifying all that chaos, allowing you to orbit, rotate, zoom, and even reference in your heads-up display, so getting lost is a non-issue. Even if you manage to stray or wander too far, Samus's suit will scan the area and give you hints on suspicious locations to investigate. This retains meaningful flavor and immersion while still helping players who are lost. This should honestly be a staple in all Metroid games going forward. Minimal, flavorful hints, and only when necessary. Zero Mission, I'm looking at you. So you'd think three-dimensional level design would be literally cubing the potential hiding places for pathways and pickups like missiles and energy tanks, and you'd be right. But with Samus's new visors, finding them isn't so imposing, aside from the ominous humming whoom sound you'll hear when goodies are close by, helping players out with the hot and cold game. The new scan visor allows Samus to catalog and decipher lore entries, identify enemy and boss intel, plus interact with electronics like elevators. It's the perfect mechanism for on-demand story and lore embellishments, as well as acting as a clever hint system. Also new is the thermal visor, allowing Samus to track heat sources from either enemies or circuitry, allowing for clever puzzle solving and identifying of enemy weak points. Returning from Super Metroid is the X-ray visor, allowing Samus to once again see through walls and enemies to reveal pickups, secrets, and vulnerabilities. And of course we have the combat visor, your basic vision for unaided sight and shooting. But if need be, you can shoot in all but the scan visor, and even flip between visors at any moment in combat, and thankfully, they're all utilized just enough to feel like real useful upgrades. On top of the 4 visors, Samus also equips up to 4 beams as well, all with unique properties and uses throughout the game, accessed by a directional flick of the C-stick, while the visors use the D-pad. So you start with just the power beam, which due to its high rate of fire can hold up in almost any fight, even in late game. The wave beam fires 3 shots in parabolic waves, and is especially helpful in overloading enemies or electronics with a surge of electricity. The ice beam fires a concentrated shotgun blast of ice like a cannon, and has the ability to freeze certain enemies solid like the infamous Metroids. And lastly, she unlocks the plasma beam, which superheats its targets, going so far as to completely obliterate some enemies with a full charge, melting them down to nothing instantly. It is so freaking satisfying. Even more so are the new missile upgrade integrations, to make their beam's charged attacks even beefier by shooting a bunch of missiles alongside the charge shot itself. They're all just fun, bonus, extra powerful attacks and totally unnecessary for beating the game. The charged power beam fires a traditional super missile. The wave beam fires the Wave Buster, a constant stream of energy and missiles totally not ripped from Ghostbusters.
The Ice Beam charges into the Ice Spreader, a massive single icy blast, and the Plasma Beam becomes a continuous missile-fueled flamethrower, which is just as devastating and amazing as it sounds. There are plenty of enemies and situations where you'll need certain beams or visors to progress or overcome challenges, and fortunately, the sharp controls in UI keep you feeling like a powerful bounty hunter and less disoriented from overcomplication. All Samus's other upgrades are modified for 3D platforming to avoid breaking the game, like Space Jump becoming a double jump, Morph Ball bombs only letting you jump twice and not infinitely anymore, and the Spider Ball requiring magnetic rails to function so it can't be used everywhere. Understandable nerfs. The Power Suit, Various Suit, and Gravity Suit all reprise their traditional 2D roles, with the new Phazon Suit being the new ultimate go-anywhere best defense upgrade, allowing Samus to walk unaffected through dangerously irradiated glowy goop called Phazon without the brain cancer. Even the Power Bombs and Grapple Beam make a return, allowing Samus to drop massive explosions and swing across large gaps. There's also the new Boost Ball for ramp puzzles and extra speed. I know we're spending a lot of time just on the power-ups, but they're all so cool and implemented so well that they all deserve mentioning as they define the gameplay. Long story short, the controls and mechanics are solid, the upgrades are awesome, and the open exploration in the winding 3D map perfectly reflects the best of what 2D exploration even offered. And then there's the bosses! And enemies in general! This world just feels so alien and dangerous while there's dozens of unique creatures and boss encounters, all giving you a reason to utilize your full arsenal, but aren't overly punishing so players aren't discouraged from exploring and backtracking. There are so many cool interactions in this game, like when you can set some captive Metroids loose on the unsuspecting space pirates, or when the lights suddenly shut down and you need to use your thermals to survive and escape the blackout ambush. This game still does have its scary moments. But undoubtedly, the cornerstone of the gameplay is in the freedom to explore the open map at your own pace, slowly growing in strength along your travels and uncovering abilities that both assist you in combat and traversal in an addictive feedback loop. It never gets old, especially if you spice things up with a randomizer. Or you could just join us in our own randomized Let's Play, shameless plug. Let's cut to the chase. Metroid Prime is the best looking GameCube game. Hold on, you can't just... Well, with a simple up-res, this game could easily pass as a modern Switch title. The models, animations, and special effects all create the magnificent illusion of a fully living atmospheric alien world. Sure, it looks nice and all, but good graphics become great with a fine-tuned attention to detail. Oh, like how Samus's HUD shows dynamic proximity to hazards like heat and radiation, or how the X-ray visor reveals that Samus is making different hand gestures to switch between beam types and fire. Yeah, and how flashes of bright light or fog or explosions let you see her face reflected in the visor, and the in-depth design of the decrepit lore-packed Chozo ruins and environments. You know, this was that long story I was trying to cut short. I know, it's just one of the best looking GameCube games. Okay, moving on. So canonically, the Prime series is a little weird. It happens between Metroid 1 and 2, and some fans have even debated whether it is officially canon at all. To which I say, why is Ridley in Samus Returns recovering from his metaform if it never happened? I think we can all put that stupid, baseless diversion to rest now. Thanks, Mercury Steam! Now, you've heard me describe my ideal storytelling in games like Metal Gear Solid and The Witcher, where it's there in droves when you want it and gone when you don't. Well, due to the scan visor being your on-demand lore outlet, Metroid Prime is storytelling at its absolute finest. Now, hold up, I still get to talk about what happens anyway, right? Let's be honest, you're gonna do it even if I say no. Samus responds to a distress beacon and investigates the frigate Orpheon, which turns out to be a space pirate transportation and research complex, recovering from a recent and vicious attack. After defeating the Parasite Queen at the core of the facility, Samus is hit with an electrical blast, causing nearly all of her suit's power-ups to malfunction. Because of course. Come on, at least we have a reason to start from square one this time. Plus, it's miles better than what actually happened in— No! Ugh. So while escaping, Samus stumbles across the very mechanized and very much alive Ridley, whom Samus chases out of the self-destructing facility and down to the planet below, Talon 4, as the entire frigate breaks apart and plummets to the surface. From here, the non-linearity kicks in. While tailing Ridley to investigate how he survived Metroid 1,
Samus discovers the ancient Chozo ruins, space pirate bases, and learns of a massive meteor that crash landed ages ago on Talon 4. This meteor, the Chozo called the Great Poison, brought with it the highly radioactive and corrupting Phazon that would later be mined by the invading space pirates who began experimenting with the deadly substance for its potential as an energy source and experimental bioweapons. You even explore the crashed sunken frigate Orpheon on your journey. As if the Super Metroid similarities weren't enough, with chasing Ridley to a planet, exploring its various elemental biomes, and learning about the world's dead civilization before ultimately discovering the Chozo Temple, blocking away the source of the infection below, and collecting 12 artifacts to release the seal and descend into the impact crater and eliminate the monstrous creature at its core known only to the Chozo as the Worm. Some people complain about backtracking for the artifacts, but if you're diligent with your searching and procuring of items throughout the game, as you should be in Metroid titles, then you'll probably have several before you're even required to start hunting them down by the end. Plus, the game itself even gives you hints on tracking down any stragglers, so... Anyway, immediately after opening the seal, Meta Ridley ambushes Samus in an intense and highly anticipated final battle. Except not really, not really, not really, not really, not really? One more time. So after defeating Meta Ridley, Samus descends into the impact crater, discovering the highly mutated source of the infection, the bringer of the Great Poison itself, the Metroid Prime. This fight is awesome. The Prime is immune to all but one of your beams at once, with its current weakness revealed by its current color, where it takes on those attack attributes. After several phases, its outer shell breaks away and reveals its floating core. The true form of the Metroid Prime can spawn Metroids and shift in and out of visibility for all but one of your visors, and the only way to damage it is by standing in its discharged pools of Phazon and obliterating it with your newly charged Phazon beam. Because Super Metroid references. After blasting the Prime down to a literal puddle, it uses the last of its strength to yank Samus's Phazon suit away and into the radioactive muck, as Samus escapes from the collapsing crater and watches it all crumble away from the safety of her ship, with the comfort of knowing she'd eliminated the Great Poison that corrupted Talon Force Chozo, the race to which she owes her life. That is, unless you collected 100% of the pickups for a hidden final scene revealing that from the bubbling puddle of Phazon that is the remains of Metroid Prime, a grotesque human arm emerges with a menacing eye growing out of the back of its hand. It's gross and awesome, and reveals that the Prime was simply taking on the form of whatever it believed to be the strongest creature in the galaxy. Previously a heavily mutated Metroid, and has now become the only known entity powerful enough to defeat it, a Dark Samus. So sure, that's what happens, but the real story is in discovering the hidden lore scans, piecing together the mystery of the Chozo, the space pirates, and the Great Poison that corrupted Talon 4. The game practically set the standard for uncovering the mysteries of a dead world in Metroidvania storytelling, and unfortunately didn't set the standard for well thought out dark doppelganger villain backstories. A little effort goes a long way, guys! Good video game music doesn't just set the atmosphere, but the raw emotion for the player to experience, pulling them into the scene with memorable and impactful immersion, and this soundtrack. This is the best soundtrack I've ever heard! What's a little much? Each track is so great at what it does that I can only describe them by their uniquely expressed emotions of mystery, fear, wonder, excitement, danger, and triumph, as regular descriptions just can't do them enough justice. It doesn't mean I can't try. That corny stereotypical alien sound we all know gets masterfully utilized to orchestrate remixed Metroid classics like Norfair from Super, and various new memorable melodies like Sunken Frigate and Phendrana Drifts. And the main theme is so darn good, especially when it gets a glorious reprise during the last phase of the final boss. Don't forget, good sound design also means solid sound effects and audio cues. No other game comes close to having as many tracks as Metroid Prime downloaded on my computer, and I listened to a ton of game music. So yeah, you could say it's pretty good. Like a radiant sexual supernova kinda good. I don't know where Nintendo gets off selling drugs to kids, but here you go. Retro Studios was given an impossible job of revitalizing a dormant 2D classic in an entirely new perspective without compromising the original, and not only crushed their goals, but also created an entirely new masterpiece in the process. And if you don't think that's a big deal, just look what happened when Team Ninja tried the same thing. The positive gamer in me, 10 out of 10. It's outstanding, incredible, amazing, breathtaking. Are you shocked? I mean, really? Me? Come on. What were you expecting after I called the game a sexual supernova? The critical gamer in me actually thought long and hard over this, debating whether or not this game's few shortcomings hold back its historic achievements in game design, and determined after way too much internal deliberation that Metroid Prime fully deserves to be honored with a 10 out of 10, being nothing less than a brilliant solution to an impossible problem. You got a problem with that? Well, I don't care. This is my show. And for as critical as I clearly am with games, these few and far between double 10 out of 10 scores should stand out as the true cream of the crop in every regard, like Metroid Prime. But what do you think? Tell us how your positive and critical sides rate Metroid Prime in the comments below. Personal enjoyment is always going to be arbitrary, but if you're ignoring this game's colossal critical achievements, then you're just playing with yourself. Let's cut to the chase. Today we're going to be covering one of the most divisive video games ever made, and its divisiveness stems solely from it being a clumsy transition to the Nintendo Wii for one of the greatest video game franchises of all time, The Legend of Zelda. You gotta put yourself in the shoes of Zelda fans in 2010 to really understand what we're even talking about here, as this game is largely affected by its reputation and negative impact. After the incredible likes of Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, Zelda leapt to the GameCube with the shocking Wind Waker, which had an initial surprise of its own for its striking visual departure. But its gameplay was so captivating and purely Zelda that fans inevitably welcomed it with open arms. But for those of us who always dreamed of a more Tolkien-style 3D Zelda when playing Ocarina or Link to the Past, we weren't left behind either with the late GameCube release of Twilight Princess. The game released so late in the GameCube's life, it also got an early port to the next system, the Wii, with light motion control integration. No matter how you slice it, a game sporting the name Zelda meant one thing: quality. These were all modern masterpieces, and it seemed like Zelda could absolutely do no wrong. But without counting Twilight Princess as the real next-gen Zelda installment, we were all left waiting and imagining what Nintendo had planned for Link that would once again blow all our minds. It wouldn't be until 5 years after the Wii's release that we would finally see the creation of the true new 3D Zelda, Skyward Sword. But even pre-launch, fans were getting concerned. Not just about another graphical departure akin to the Wind Waker, or the fact that the game used the Wii's motion controls. We saw these elements work well before when we doubted them in the past with Wind Waker and Twilight Princess. Sure, they had us raising our eyebrows, but the real concern was that the game's motion controls seemed so invasive and obtuse, Shigeru Miyamoto himself embarrassingly couldn't even properly demonstrate them in front of a live audience at E3 2010. The problem wasn't the fact that the new Zelda was different or innovative, it was that it didn't even play like Zelda, aside from having zero accessibility options, forcing its players to play it in the uncomfortable waggly arm fashion that Nintendo demanded. But hey, it was Zelda, and we were still gonna give it a try. And by November 2011, we could finally play it for ourselves and evaluate just how grounded our concerns were. In hindsight, we were right to be hesitant, but the real kicker is that we weren't even close to grasping the indescribable depths of disappointment and aggravation that is The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword. And with Nintendo's HD re-release for the Switch, featuring numerous updates and changes to the base game, there's no better time than now to revisit this abomination. I can't believe you've been touching it for this long and it hasn't burnt through your hand or anything. I'm gonna tell you up front, if it weren't for my immense love of Zelda and neurotic personality as a completionist, I honestly would have, and probably should have, stopped playing this game after the first hour. Funnily or sad enough, that's what happened to most players. I've seen several polls done online collecting player experiences within the game, and quitting early on is the most common outcome. For a $60 game of a mainline and highly respected franchise, that's almost unheard of. So sure, I found it clunky and awkward, the graphics were ugly, and the mediocre story and its irritating characters were all shoved down my throat, but I kept going, because it's Zelda! And to be completely honest, there are several things I do really like about this game. And to be completely frank, this is one of those few games that will stick with you for a long time, and the way you think about it will continue to change as you experience more games and revisit it. Unfortunately for me, it went from being a bad game to the absolute worst video game I've ever played in my entire life! Now hold on, we'll address all your concerns, but also take a look at what the HD re-release does to address those issues, if anything at all. He didn't even argue with me. When the critical gamer is putting on a straight face after I blatantly accuse a game of being the worst game ever created, you know that we're talking some serious bottom-of-the-barrel crap here. There are worse games out there, but only because being bad is arbitrary and relative to your expectations. And do you know what I expect in a Zelda game? Oh man, hold on tight, this ride's about to get bumpy. Where do I even start? There's no getting around it. These controls are asinine. They're so bad, they all but single-handedly ruin the entire experience. Let's be perfectly clear. Motion controls are not inherently a bad thing. Not having accessibility options for disabled or otherwise frustrated players, however, is. There are plenty of great games out there that do motion controls right and are enhanced by having them. This, however, is not one of those games. But hey, I am the positive gamer. So let's start with a few good things about the gameplay. This still is a 3D Zelda game, inheriting the staples from the past entries, like puzzle-solving your way through action-adventure-style dungeons and accumulating various utility upgrades to help you in more combat and exploration. Now, where this game deviates from the norm is from its previously mentioned heavily integrated motion controls, as the gameplay and level design were specifically created to cater to this choice. To get this game to even function properly, you'll need to be playing with a Wii Motion Plus, which is basically an upgraded or modified Wiimote to improve its accuracy. Though, honestly, it still isn't very accurate. It's inevitably laggy, but it does allow you to swing the Wiimote in various directions for the game to register. Prepare to do this a lot. Every single sword swing in this game needs to be performed by physically swinging the Wiimote in one of 8 directions. The nunchuck is also sensitive to motion controlling your shield for parries and other movements. I get on paper how this sounded cool, and admittedly, I thought it was at first too. Twilight Princess on Wii had Link swinging his sword with a flick of the Wiimote and aiming his bow and arrows by pointing at the screen, and it only got you dreaming of being even more immersed in the game world by truly wielding the Master Sword and slicing however you wanted and in any direction. How could it all go so wrong, you ask? The problem is this entire game is designed around this gimmick. If you didn't need to slice Deku Babas or shielded Bokoblins in particular consistently changing directions in order to even damage them, or spin your arms to solve hokey puzzles, and instead this was Zelda business as usual, then the motion controls would have actually enhanced the gaming experience. But with the game's insistence in being all about waggling a stick first and foremost, the Zelda parts get neglected. Another huge problem with this design concept is its inevitable input lag and unresponsiveness that comes with motion controls. When you press a button, your brain instantly knows that you pressed it, and you feel the button underneath your thumb, and you see an instantaneous response in the game. With motion, you could be moving far past the response window, and you never really know where you're supposed to be or what you're even doing wrong! You'll be recalibrating the Wiimote a lot as the game inevitably loses sync with you, as you swear you swung the sword diagonally, but it kept reading as vertically instead. Sure, it's annoying, but it's the price you've got to pay for playing the Wii version, as there are no other options for accessibility modes at all. The HD re-release on Switch, however, finally adds this feature, allowing you to directionally slice with the analog stick and map the rest of the controls to regular buttons. I cannot understate how this suddenly shifts the game controls from horrendous to playable. But keep in mind, this entire game from start to finish was designed with the intention of players finding the gimmicky motion controls enjoyable. So by playing with buttons, yes, you're making it tremendously less of a headache to play, but you're also completely subverting the game's inherent design philosophy by doing so. It's like playing Duck Hunt with a mouse. So you'd think the conversation would just end there with the gimmicky controls, but unfortunately Skyward Sword also introduced a lot of other totally unrelated yet frustrating features. So I guess they thought that Link parrying Octorok attacks was too OP, so they added a damage buildup mechanic so overuse would destroy your shield. This adds nothing to the game but needless frustration as your shield keeps breaking deep in dungeons or in faraway places, requiring you to backtrack to Skyloft to either repair or replace it. Ugh. Skyloft. This small floating sky town is unfortunately what you would call a hub area, where basically aside from a couple shops and some underwhelming floating islands, you can access, brace yourself, 3, and only 3 areas to explore. Oh my god, this just sucks in 7 different colors. To make things even lazier, you actually have to revisit these areas multiple times, not just for repeated backtracking fetch quests, but because these areas end up doubling as extra areas you'd expect to be in the game. For example, the fair and woods get flooded, so now it's an underwater swimming area taking place on the same map. This is simply awful. If you want to make gamers have a huge case of the feel-bads, then drop them into small segmented, disconnected, linear maps in an action-adventure series known for its exploration, and then make them revisit those same maps again later multiple times with marginal differences just to pad out the game because you were too lazy to finish your homework on time and complete your game. And it doesn't help that Skyloft itself is incredibly content barren. Though you do get the ability to fly around on a Crayola duck-faced dodo bird called a Loftwing, with more awful motion controls! What really sucks is just how lifeless the Sky World is. This is nothing like Wind Waker's open ocean, which they were clearly going for here. The problem being is there's just hardly anyone to talk to, barely any goodies to find, and all around nothing interesting to do in any direction. We also haven't mentioned Link's limited inventory pouch yet either. So Link can hold up to 8 item pouches by the end of the game, accessed by, of course, a motion control wheel selector. But the real problem with the inventory management is entirely with how it bungles past Zelda game design concepts, and frankly, craps on all of it in favor of being pointlessly cumbersome. So literally everything takes up an inventory slot. 8 pockets for made items and up to 8 for everything else. From your slingshot to your shield to each and every bottle you have to side quest items and even previously non-permanent item upgrades like larger quivers for arrow expansions all require one of your slots to equip. You're probably wondering how this obtuse limited inventory works in a game all about finding and collecting upgrades. So once again, the designers thought that forcing the player back to Skyloft randomly on their adventure was fun. And that's exactly what you have to do in order to exchange items in and out of your inventory. Need an item you left out? Maybe a second bottle. Or that bomb bag upgrade you bought thinking it was a permanent upgrade like every other freaking game, but instead it's another item you've gotta lug around just to utilize! Speaking of backtracking to Skyloft, we should explain how much of an absolute pain this is. You can only fly back up to the floating town at very particular points on the map, and they're seemingly never on your way or in convenient locations. However, the Switch version is compatible with a new amiibo that we've got to talk about. So since Nintendo realized that this part of the game was about as fun as sticking your dick in a wasp nest, they created an incredibly helpful quality of life improvement in the form of allowing Link to teleport back and forth between Skyloft and the ground level where he left. This would be amazing were it not exclusively locked behind an expensive toy add-on as scalper bait. Locking quality of life improvements in a video game behind paywalls is bad enough of a business practice, especially one this direly needed in the base game. But to do it with a product that gets notoriously scalped by price gougers around the world with limited inventory is not only negligent, it's downright predatorily tone deaf. I can only imagine how many Switch players will be unable to use this feature because of this moronic blunder, and will inevitably get stuck in dungeons where they're out of inventory space or missing important items, and instead get forced into backtracking the long way to Skyloft just so they can go back through the dungeon and do it all over again. Speaking of dungeons, I just want to point out how underwhelming they all are this time. Each one is designed around heavy implementation of motion control puzzles, and utilizing the one item you found in that dungeon dozens of times to progress. Some gimmicks are kinda cool, like the time puzzles, but even the boss keys are these awful 3D rotation puzzles you need to fumble around with in order to even use. Even the enemies go from frustrating to downright infuriating over time, like how bokoblins used to just block random directions with bladed weapons, but later on use electrified stun knives that will hurt you for even swinging in the wrong way and hitting their block. When these guys gang up on you, the game ceases any foolish pretense of fun you thought you were having. Sure, the enemies suck, but it's the bosses where this game goes from bad to I just want to go home levels of bad. Many of them are just far more irritating versions of the directional sword blocking enemies, but made worse. Girahim is a motion control nightmare, and I especially hated the skeleton pirate guy you have to push back in these 3 ridiculous ring-out style games of freaking Fruit Ninja. By the way, they even recycle this boss again in a later dungeon, as if it weren't already bad enough.
And that's just technically a mini-boss.
And even on the main bosses themselves, you can't even so much as experiment and try to fight them without being immediately frozen in place and told exactly what you need to do by possibly the single worst aspect of this entire game, Fi.
We joke about Navi from Ocarina being annoyingly chatty, but Navi pales in comparison to the indescribable abomination of game design that is Fi.
According to Nintendo, you are stupid. You are helpless. And you need to be led by the hand throughout the entire game bit by bit like a toddler on a short leash at the zoo, because left to your own devices, there's simply no way that in all of your ineptitude could you possibly figure out this game's primitive attempt at puzzles or where to go in this extremely linear game.
Fi appears constantly, badgering Link with an endless stream of advice in the most forceful hint system I've ever seen in any video game. 95% of Fi's dialogue should already be painfully obvious to the player as she forcefully interrupts your progress to tell you something redundant and in excruciating, unskippable detail, no less.
And it's not just, hey Link, shoot the obvious glowing eyeball on the boss to damage it. It's also, hey Link, this upcoming area is too hot and you will take heat damage going there. Hey Link, you should place a bomb here to blow up this cracked wall. Hey Link, your health is low. Hey Link, here's how you solve the puzzle you just stumbled across and haven't even tried to solve yet. Hey Link, you're on fire. Hey Link, just give me the controller.
It doesn't help that Fi's dialogue is also written in a weirdly dry, computerized, analytical fashion, making everything that she has to tell you all the more lifeless. She can't just say how to do something, but she also has to tell you that there is a 98% probability that the present situation will be solved by executing the following appropriate input commands.
I'm not exaggerating when I say that sometimes you can't even so much as take 2 steps without Fi constantly pinging in the corner of your screen wanting to tell you something obvious, or outright completely halting your progress altogether, forcing you to listen to what she has to say. And when I say constantly, I mean constantly.
Fortunately, Nintendo realized that Fi was the worst backseat gamer in history, and they needed to find a way to shut her up. So their solution in the Switch version was to make most of her dialogue optional, as well as making all dialogue in general skippable.
Kinda hard to applaud them for adding a basic feature present in video games since the 80s, but hey, it's a step in the right direction.
Unfortunately, Fi's hand-holding doesn't stop there. She's also pivotal in the new dowsing mechanic, where you can select targets like characters or collectibles, and physically point your sword around the screen like the doofus in Shadow of the Colossus in order to point out every little hidden secret the game even has to offer for even the most boneheaded of players.
Yes, dowsing practically undermines the entire point of Zelda games, but at least it's a more natural solution for forced motion control integration than Link's awkward sword swinging.
When your sword is the Wiimote, Link's entire arm is weirdly controlled by your wrist, like a ragdoll puppet. It looks nothing like swinging something in real life and looks hilariously awkward.
Well, there are those sections you have to play entirely without your sword or any of your other tools to prove your worth.
Oh my god, the Silent Realm. Have we already said something is the worst part of the gameplay yet?
Yes, multiple times.
Fine, and this ties for the worst. These forced segments, mandatory for progression, limit Link to having no equipment at all and set him in another repeated version of the same areas he's already explored and require him to collect 15 sacred tears and never once get caught by one of the dozens of patrolling guardians, or else he's forced to start the entire trial all over again.
To make matters worse, you're in a rush to gather the tears because each one you find halts the movement of the Guardians for 10 seconds, but it's also a stealth segment, so by going too fast, you'll slip up eventually and have to start the whole thing over again. But going too slow means you'll have an even harder time of dealing with the patrolling Guardians.
It's a miserable experience, and you have to do this 4 times in different maps throughout the main campaign. I get that they were inspired by the spirit light collecting in Twilight Princess, but you felt like a predator on the hunt when you overcame those obstacles in that game. This time, you just feel like the only thing being tested is your patience. It's truly awful.
To make matters worse, this is nothing like the rest of the game at all. You have no equipment, and it doesn't even find a way to actually test Link to prove his worth like they claim. It was all just a dumb excuse to make puzzles out of the new stamina meter.
Oh my god, the stamina meter. It needed to stumble here so it could be properly ironed out in Breath of the Wild, so I won't be too hard on it. But the whole game is just full of bland running and climbing puzzles, where you need to keep touching the glowing green plants to keep going, or else you'll fall, sink in quicksand, or become exhausted and waste your time and hearts. I don't understand how that's supposed to even remotely resemble fun! Most of this game's innovations revolve around limiting or hindering Link in ways like this, and I just can't get behind that design philosophy at all. And that's all on top of the heavy bias toward making absolutely everything imaginable motion control based, which again, I just can't agree with on any level. It also feels like a game that takes pleasure in wasting your time. If it wasn't Fee, then it was the unskippable dialogue, the cutscenes, and the fact that every single time you boot up the game, Link needs to remind you what a rupee is, or any other collectible in the game is every single time you pick one up as if you've never seen it before. Which all gets fixed in the HD remaster, thank God. But how they even considered this to be a remotely good idea in the first place is baffling. Twilight Princess annoyingly did this with rupees before its own HD remaster, but this time it's absolutely everything! The game doesn't respect your time, but more importantly, it doesn't respect your intelligence. It honestly feels like they had zero faith in players finding out even the simplest of things throughout the game, to the extent that they wouldn't even give them the chance to solve puzzles, fight bosses, or so much as pick up a piece of amber without telling them exactly what to do in painfully drawn out, unskippable detail.
Kinda like this review so far.
Ugh, but that's not even the end of it all! Why do I have to keep drawing on the screen and swinging in angles to hit blocks that hardly qualify as puzzles and prove my worth by collecting glowing balls and music notes over and over again when I just want to play Zelda?
And there's no amount of quality of life improvements that can ever fix that.
I just wanted to play Zelda! Backing up a bit, the GameCube's Wind Waker and Twilight Princess were both beautiful in their own right for outstanding art directions. Skyward Sword, however, the next generation Zelda, I might remind you, visually looks nothing less than a downgrade of both games' art styles. I guess they wanted to consolidate Zelda's visual identity, which I can understand. Personally, I loved having the cartoony as well as the realistic fantasy looks across the 2D and 3D games. But seeing this odd departure from both at once just resulted in a gross amalgamation that I just can't get behind. And what's with the lipstick? Character models and expressions all look so unsettling in this game, and no matter how long I play it, I just can't get over how uncomfortable it makes me feel.
You can say that again. This is your new reality. Anyway, almost like a kick in the teeth, Nintendo released a magnificent Zelda tech demo showing off the graphical potential of the Wii U, depicting Link battling a giant spider boss, a mere 2 months after Skyward Sword released. This demo looks absolutely breathtaking, and coming so soon after Skyward Sword just made those of us turned off by its art direction all the more validated in our disappointment. Yeah, I know graphically it's a little much for the Wii, but that doesn't mean the visual identity of the demo couldn't have been used for Skyward Sword instead. Honestly, I could probably get past a lot of Skyward Sword's heinous gameplay had it actually looked more like this. It's like they made the demo to showcase what the next-gen Zelda should look like, but for some reason I'll never understand what we actually got was this. It's not just Link that looks off in Skyward Sword. It's the characters, the creatures, the enemies, even the user interface, and that god-awful massive Wiimote HUD constantly reminding you of the controls taking up an obscene amount of screen space. Now maybe this is all just some Pavlovian response to my disdain for the gameplay rubbing off on the art style, but I distinctly recall awaiting this game pre-launch and being mostly disappointed with its visuals, and if anything, excited for the gameplay. So take that as you will. Personally, I think the entire game just looks like a hokey, cheap cartoon, and that tech demo did nothing but justify my complaints about the game's disappointing, jarring shift in graphics. The main antagonists are a giant toe monster and a flaming demon of tongue fetishes. I think you're justified in wishing for something a little more Zelda? Yeah, but to be fair, some bosses like the giant scorpion and the multi-sword arm dude are pretty cool. What about the giant squid version of Boo from Monsters, Inc.? You've got to be out of your mind if you even remotely think this looks like a well-designed 3D Zelda boss. So, you go through this whole pirate ship dungeon, which alone is pretty neat, by the way. All the while, occasional booms and crashes rock the boat, building up to this ultimate battle where you finally reach the bow and face off against Frickin' Mike Wazowski!
When your graphics and visual identity cause jerks in immersion this frequently, it does nothing but put down the rest of the gameplay, which, as we previously discussed, needs all the help it can get! I will say that the concept and promotional artwork for this game look outstanding. When it came time to make the actual models and animations, I don't know where it all went oh so wrong. It's like this game was cursed or something! But it's not like we don't have anything good to say about it for the rest of this review, right? Okay, so long before the events of the other games, Link, along with an extremely small town of people, live high above the clouds in the floating island city of Skyloft. Nice name. So we're keeping the lipstick, huh? The few people who do live here pretend like their species' survival isn't at stake or anything, and just go about their lives even though all 30 of them make up the last of their kind, and like nobody has families or anything, as if they're all just some magical cartoon characters in a make-believe fantasy world devoid of any real thought or care put into their civilization. Anyway, Link has about as much character as a mailbox like usual, and the entire story just kind of happens around him, or to him, as many characters have drawn out one-sided conversations at him throughout the entire adventure. So we're told that Link and Zelda are childhood friends, because anime. And Link gets antagonized by Groose, an obnoxious schoolyard bully, accompanied by his two nobody lackeys, basically competing for Zelda's attention. But there's no school or responsibilities, of course, because anime, and considering Zelda is the only female their age at all, their entire race is doomed. But for the sake of painfully thick helpings of flirtatious kindergarten romance, the entirety of the plot centers around Link pursuing Zelda. Early on, however, you'll need to jump through a lot of hoops to even get the plot rolling. If you thought the intro to Twilight Princess was long, then I've got some bad news for you. After climbing some boxes, Groose kidnaps your Loftwing, you get it back, race him in some night training tournament thing, and then after more sappy Zelda scenes than a sane human can stomach, she falls into the clouds below, and Link is met by a floating manifestation of the goddess sword named Thea, guiding him through a dream to finally get a sword. This takes forever, if I didn't emphasize that enough. Thea informs Link that Zelda is still alive, and they'll need to descend below the clouds to the surface world in order to track her down and save her from the evil forces that swallowed her up. So you do just that, and the game now becomes follow Zelda to the next area, get caught up in a battle with the creepy edgelord frogman Girahim, who is also tracking Zelda down but for his own nefarious purposes, and narrowly miss Zelda before she's taken off by a Sheikah servant of the goddess and whisked away to the next area so you can do the same song and dance again. On paper, it's still the same travel from one dungeon to another, collecting the things to do something that lets you collect other things to get to other dungeons, but with a tremendous amount of fluff. I don't know how to put this nicely, but I don't like a single character in this entire game. And believe me, I tried to. If it wasn't the fact that not a single character got even the smallest semblance of a character arc, except for Groose, though inconsequential as it is, it was that everyone's dialogue and overall presence is just unlikable. Aside from no one giving me the impression of being remotely believable in terms of the context of this world, with only the bare bones characterization being fleshed out, I get the impression that the characters are all living in the shell of an unfinished project due to how ambitionless they all are. And maybe how they all do nothing but nag me over fetch quests. Zelda character and stories don't need to be grand, or even great, but they do need to reflect and radiate the objective thematic design of the world. And the characters in Skyward Sword just make me want to stop playing, either out of boredom or out of their off-putting natures. Anyway, after missing Zelda for a third time, a giant walking testicle monster called the Imprisoned breaks loose, where you'll need to stop it in the first of many boss encounters where you stab its toes and trip it until it gives up. Ugh. So this thing is what Girahim is trying to revive, his master Demise, who needs Zelda's power to revitalize himself due to her being a living incarnation of the goddess Hylia or something. So you gotta go gather some sacred flame business by backtracking all over, swatting the testicle monster upside the head with a rolled up newspaper every once in a while, before ultimately collecting all the crap in the known universe, proving your worth for the 1000th time by performing dozens of irrelevant menial tasks, assembling the Triforce, and making a wish to destroy Demise for good, causing Skyloft to plummet to the surface world below. Problem is, Girahim played Chrono Trigger, so cleverly decides to kidnap Zelda and revive his master Demise in the distant past before Link's wish ever happens. Suddenly you get a weird redemption arc for Groose of all people, and out of nowhere, an unfitting yet strangely cathartic horde battle of bokoblins straight out of Dynasty Warriors, and Demise himself summoning his own Dark Master Sword from Girahim. I guess he and Fire like literal blades from Xenoblade Chronicles 2. Yet shockingly, even more uninspired with the generic anime light and dark trope. And if you were expecting some big evil plan exposition here, then you've got your expectations set a little too high. Demise is the literal incarnation of bad guy for bad guy's sake. So after waggling your wrist at him long enough, Demise meets his fate and curses Link and Zelda to perpetual reincarnation to do battle with his evil will throughout the ages endlessly in order to needlessly justify the other games, and this one being the first. Ugh. That's another thing Skyward Sword ruined. Timeline speculation was a big thing before this game, but with the 25th anniversary, Nintendo released the Hyrule Historia, which among many other things, blatantly spelled out the entire franchise's timeline, which, I might add, was completely bogus, being so bad and nonsensical that I've yet to meet a single knowledgeable Zelda fan willing to accept its sheer idiocy. Which we already talked about in length in a video discussing the sheer hypocrisy of this slapped-together timeline that you can check out linked in the description, shameless plug. And with Skyward Sword headlining this disaster and cementing its canonical dominance over all others permanently, as well as shutting down an entire community of avid timeline theorists overnight, this either disappointed fans or outright pissed them off. So sure, the actual story beats in Skyward Sword aren't the real problem. Sure, it's far too long-winded and yet simultaneously bare bones as it is, but it's the fact that it did nothing but damage the reputation of the franchise and soiled its own mythology of the same story being retold throughout the ages in a ridiculous timeline with one fell swoop. It's a fresh turd sitting on top of the entire ice cream sundae that is Zelda. You can't ignore it, and it somehow found a way to seep its way into soiling the rest of the series along with it. Okay, so at least this section should be positive. Hamster listened to well over 100 tracks in the soundtrack, and surely found great Zelda music for our video, right? You found a lot of great Zelda music for our video, right? I can't believe it, but this 3D mainline Zelda game soundtrack kinda sucks. Admittedly, after playing the game, I don't really remember any tracks standing out as memorable or iconic like in the other Zelda games. Outside of the melodies, it directly rips from Link to the Past. The soundtrack is just adequate. It technically does its job as background music and sound effects for a video game. But this isn't just an ordinary video game. It's Zelda! Am I wrong for wishing something for a little more grand, or at the very least hummable? There are a couple tracks I do really like, but keep in mind this soundtrack is enormous. The ratio of great to forgettable music is like 1 to 50. That's just not okay. Most of the music just made me groan and wish it would stop, or reminded me of areas I absolutely couldn't stand as I had to revisit them for the 4th time. The good stuff tends to either get used in one-off cutscenes, or it's yet another Link to the Past theme. Should we give it points for that? You want to give it credit for leaning on nostalgia and reminding you of better games you could have been playing instead? How could this even happen? Twilight Princess and Wind Waker have some of the best soundtracks ever made. Why is this game so much worse than them in every single category? You know, Fee's obnoxious audio peaking ping noise counts towards sound design. Why did I ever buy this game in the first place? Funny you say that, because the next section is... forget Zelda. If you really enjoy games like Wii Sports Resort, then definitely give this game a try, because even Eiji Aonuma admitted Skyward Sword takes more inspiration from that game than it does from any other actual Zelda title, and it certainly plays that way. I cannot, in good conscience, ever recommend a single human being pay $60 for this nearly unplayable abomination, or even so much as sit down and waste dozens of hours of their life wiggling their arms around in frustration, even for free. Just like the Dynasty Warriors spin-off games, this is taking a totally new gameplay philosophy and giving it the Zelda-themed coat of paint. don't play it just because you thought it was a mainline Zelda game, as you'll inevitably leave it disappointed. But instead, play it solely because you're a fan of motion controls, and the Zelda theme doesn't bother you. It's not even ethical to return it after you realize the mistake you made by purchasing this festering filth, since they'll only sell it back to another poor sap like you, perpetuating the cycle. Be responsible, and throw away your trash. Actually, I think I want that 25th anniversary CD. Hold on though, what about the Switch HD re-release? Sure, paying $60 again is absurd, but assuming they somehow picked it up for free, would you recommend it? Playing the Wii version is like swimming naked in a septic tank. The updates in the HD re-release do their best to subvert what sucks so bad in the original, but they can't truly fix the core problematic game design without a total overhaul or a full-blown remake. So instead of being naked, you're wearing a hazmat suit in a septic tank. Yeah, at least it's a better experience, but you're still just splashing in a tub of diarrhea. The positive gamer in me found little to no joy in The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword, giving it my first ever 1 out of 10. Video games are supposed to be fun, but if the only real joy I ever found in this catastrophic waste was after beating it and realizing it that I never had to play it ever again, then that's a problem. A big problem. Honestly, if it weren't Zelda we're talking about here, then the game would be at least a 5, but because of the franchise's legacy, its shortcomings and outright failures are all the more disappointing in every single aspect of quality game design. The critical gamer in me still stands by the fact that I've played worse, and can at least appreciate the potential marginal enjoyment to be gleaned in Skyward Sword with a 3 out of 10. My critical score is never about what I like, or even how I feel, but how I believe each game should be fairly recognized by weighing its strengths against its weaknesses. And in that regard, Skyward Sword is a disaster on a monumental scale that gets publicly praised solely for being Zelda. However, if you're playing the Switch HD remaster, the positive gamer in me would raise my score all the way up to a 5 out of 10. This is a well-deserved massive jump for basically fixing a tremendous amount of this game's horrendous mechanics, revealing, for better or worse, that the core game itself is essentially an average Zelda game completely stripped of its gimmick. The critical gamer in me finds the Switch remaster to oddly be subverting its own design philosophy, retaining its score of a 3 out of 10. If you strip the gimmicks out of this gimmick-based game, then what are you even playing anymore? The entire point of Skyward Sword was to utilize motion control-based gameplay, from the enemies, to the dungeons, the puzzles, right down to the user interface. Effectively, the updates in this version encourage the player to not play the game. And why should you? But what do you think? Tell us how your positive and critical sides rate Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword in the comments below. But if you're so nostalgia blind to praise this game just because it's called The Legend of Zelda, then you've got to stop trusting IGN reviews and check out the Philips CDI, because my god, come on now, you're just playing with yourself! That's it. That's the intro. Pokemon Black and White was the first generation that totally hooked me pre-launch. Probably because it all leaked pre-launch. But planning out teams with friends and geeking out over new Pokemon and mechanics sure made you look cool in high school, didn't it? Okay, so maybe it was the fact that it all leaked. It made it all feel like secret knowledge and made the whole experience all the more exciting. I mean, having a huge game leak in its entirety like that was virtually unheard of at the time. And now it's an annual tradition. Nowadays, if fans want to stay unspoiled to the new Pokemon games, they've got to give up the internet from May to December every year. Keep it in your pants, Pokemon. Pokemon Black and White take full advantage of the Nintendo DS after learning from the shortcomings of their rushed attempt at developing for the console in the early Gen 4 games. They also learned how to double their profits and exploit their fans by not releasing the anticipated and trademarked Pokemon Gray, but instead 2 direct sequels. Hey, at least they actually felt like sequels. Previously, the third installments in Generations just felt like the definitive editions of the originals. But this time with direct sequels, we got some substantial changes and additions to the games, as well as continuing their stories.
But before we get ahead of ourselves, Pokemon Black and White play very similarly to the past Pokemon entries, but with some updated UI and faster load times.
Undoubtedly, the biggest change was that this was the first generation since the original to add 150 new Pokemon, and only feature those newcomers throughout your entire adventure. This ambitious move was specifically designed to try and recapture the magic of Generation 1.
And I wholeheartedly agree with this concept. Pokemon isn't great because of the specific designs of the Pokemon, but because of the joy of collecting, discovering, and adventuring that comes alongside and exploring a brand new foreign land.
And for those wanting that overwhelming experience of having the rest of the old Pokemon integrated into the adventure, that's exactly what they did with the sequels. That aside from completely restructuring the routes through which you would explore the region.
Now, outside of some new gameplay additions that got immediately abandoned, like the Joint Avenue,
it's a huge indoor shopping center strip mall that you pass through at one point where a stupid rich dude just decides, for absolutely no reason, to give you ownership of the place for you to develop at your own leisure. Then he just leaves. Like, enjoy your free mini-mall, have fun making whatever you want, and we only accept it because we're too young to know how taxes work.
Yeah, and then there's Pokestar Studios.
Oh my god. So they force you to act out in these campy movie sections in an awkward series of turn-based minigames before moving on with the story, all just so the producers can make literal billions of dollars in revenue that you will not see a penny of.
You got a free mall, shut up.
Anyway, other than all the gimmicky stuff like playing freaking dress up, this is basically Pokemon business as usual. You're still journeying across a new map, fighting a generic bad guy group called Team Plasma, defeating 8 gym leaders, and ultimately stopping an evil plot and becoming the region's champion.
With all the baggage that comes with that, like frequent HM usage, though admittedly not as bad as Gen 4, characters frequently stopping you for chatty menial story beats, and quirky gym themes that kinda outstay their welcome.
But there was still just something about the game that stuck out to me and made all the bland repetition fun. You know, the more I think about it, I'm starting to believe that what I really loved was the graphics are so nice. This is the last pixel art generation for Pokemon, and boy, do I miss it.
Hey now, I was pumped for the new 3D gen of X and Y when it launched, but there's something about having hundreds of animated Pokemon and character sprites that just made this game come alive.
I'm a sucker for sprite art as it is, and Pokemon's Gen 4 sprites were already great, but adding front and back animations to all of them was undoubtedly a tremendous amount of work, but also adds a crazy amount of character to the game.
Well, not all those animations look so hot. A good number of them are awkwardly contorting or flapping their wings in unnatural ways, and basically all of them are just using the existing sprites and stretching and moving their body parts around to simulate movement.
Don't ruin the illusion!
Fine, well what about the 3D integration? This is still an original DS game, so having a hybrid of the two never looked the best and certainly aged the game.
Sure, a 2D sprite pushing a 3D boulder with strength looks weird, but the 3D buildings and environments looked great with the characters.
Except when you run around a 3D spiraling bridge or ramp and your sprite doesn't have any diagonal animations.
Oh, come on, man, just look at the Pokemon! This one's a freaking Hydra!
And this one's a Meerkat crossing guard.
But what about this Centipede?
Ice cream cone.
Axe Dragon!
Literal garbage.
Hey, there's a sequel this time. There must be an actual story, right? But it's literally called 2! That means you must have to play the first one before understanding the story, right? It's not like they would simply rehash and recycle the formula tropes all over again and call it 2 for no discernible reason other than money, right?
Money.
Money?
Money.
Ugh. So in Black and White, you set off on your adventure in the metropolitan Unova region, alongside your 2 friends, Charon and Bianca, who kinda act as your rivals throughout the adventure, showing up randomly, testing your strength, but mostly just padding out the game with unnecessary dialogue.
When will Game Freak learn that friends and rivals are freaking antonyms?
Well, this was the first gen to go all in on that idea. Anyway, there's a 2-year gap between the first and second games, and during 2, you get to check up on them, where Charon is the new first gym leader and Bianca is the professor's assistant. So, hey, that's kinda cool. And it's the only semblance of a plot that justifies these games being sequels at all. So, hey, that's not cool.
In 2, you actually get a real rival with Hugh. I would be happy had he been given any semblance of being a meaningful character outside of copiously heaped helpings of anime.
You're about to feel my rage.
So then there's Team Plasma, who hypocritically want to prevent people from capturing and battling Pokemon by capturing and battling Pokemon. Just like in real life, the bad guys are the idiots. It's obviously PETA. That's what I just said. The rest of the characters all feel underdeveloped or not fully thought out, like N, Colress, and Jetsis. It just feels like the developers wanted to write compelling, morally weighted characters, but didn't have the time to flesh them out like they wanted to, and in the end they all just feel ambitionless or unrelatable. Come on, it's Pokemon! That's like its most defining feature! There sure are a lot of delinquent, materialistic, and trash Pokemon in this region based on New York City. You trying to say something, Japan? And all along, the real villain was capitalism. The music is decent, nothing outstanding like Gens 1 or 3, but it's consistent with its themes, if nothing else. Probably the best sound design implementation is when the music shifts into this dynamic Last Stand theme, when you've got the gym leader down to their final Pokemon, and they come out onto the battlefield with a final quip before you push through and land the finishing blow. Great video game music enhances its existing gameplay in ways that you don't really think about, and in that way, these games have pretty great soundtracks. Still, some environment themes can really get on your nerves, and that only detracts from the game. Okay, fine, I just like the nostalgic fanfare in that Last Stand theme. Longtime fans and newcomers alike should enjoy their time in these games, with additions like the Battle Subway and World Tournament, where you get to battle against prominent characters across all the previous generations, original teams and music included. For those of you who are disappointed with the past marginal differences between Pokemon games, know that this time there are entire areas that change across the games this time. Even though it all basically adds up to nothing in the end, it's better than a small handful of different Pokemon in the grass, right? And since this is black and white, buying one game over the other now makes you a racist. Or confused if you're like me and you wanted the black legendary, so you wanted to buy black to catch it, but found out too late that apparently the black game has the white one and the white game has the black one, because that makes sense. You're probably wondering why we didn't even mention the boxed legendaries, Turbine and Crotchfur. Well, we're told they split from a single super Pokemon long ago, leaving behind an icy gray shell from the split. Well, since Pokemon Gray never happened, we'll never learn what their fully powered state even was. But instead, we just got these two gross half hybrids from 2. Because money. Because money! The positive gamer in me enjoyed Pokemon Black and White enough to give them an 8 out of 10. I never put my expectations too high with Pokemon games, but this gen really had a lot to be excited about and gave me a great experience playing it with friends. The critical gamer in me gives Pokemon Black and White a strong 7 out of 10. Sticking to all new 150 Pokemon for a new generation works wonders for the game's personality and lasting impact. Though I still have issues with this game, this ambitious move was so great it only makes me wish that other generations had the nerve to try this move again. The positive gamer in me rates the sequels Black 2 and White 2 as a strong 8 out of 10. Now, these games added all the fun post-game and grinding mechanics I initially hoped for in a new Pokemon installment, and they kept me playing long after release, hooking me on the shiny hunting craze. But the critical gamer in me isn't so keen on Black 2 and White 2, giving them an average 5 out of 10. After ditching what made the originals so great, the new mechanics were welcome, but did absolutely nothing to justify themselves as sequels in any redeemable way. But what do you think? Tell us how your positive and critical sides rate Pokemon Black and White and Black 2 White 2 in the comments below. But if you keep buying 2 Pokemon games each generation,
Then why not 4?
No, you're just playing with yourself! And kind of ruining the entire point of having multiple Pokemon games to begin with, but what he said. Alright, this is the first in a string of new reviews handpicked by Patreon members choosing specific games for new episodes. So what have we got first up, Hamster? Yeah, well, we certainly got some interesting picks here, but first up I think we've got make sure Kim gets one too. But the Patreon members obviously go first, right? Okay, it's fine. Kim can start us off with her pick. But what game do you want? Oh, I bet it's Yoshi. You love Yoshi, right? Look what she's holding. You're right. That sure is a big knife. But we already did Overcooked.
Xenosaga 3, now!
Xenosaga Episode 3, an obscure PS2 JRPG series that paved the way for Xenoblade Chronicles.
The series has never been ported, updated, or remastered in any way, making the game's finale quite rare and highly sought after, fetching an average of $300 at the absolute cheapest.
But aside from the obscene rarity and price involved, you've also got to dust off the old PS2 or get your hands on a functioning one to even play it. Our PS2 died immediately after we completed Xenosaga Episode 3. Oh no, you can't play Monster Hunter 1 anymore. But the point is, this game is extremely sought after, and there are a lot of good reasons for that, which we'll get into. But the sad part is that most gamers haven't even heard of Xenosaga, due to the trilogy not even being remotely accessible. You know, this trilogy was actually supposed to be a series of 6 installments? Yeah, 2 tanked so badly that they had to backpedal their scope significantly and instead go out with a bang with a single monumental installment. That most players just won't get to experience. So instead, I'll just do my best to try and catch you all up to speed on what you've missed out, considering how you'll probably never get the chance to actually play it. I don't know, our self-deprecated whining somehow brought Metroid back from its 20-year coma. Just up-res and port this to Switch and Steam, Bamco, come on!
But Hamster, they can't do that! They're allergic to money!
You're right. It's not like the popularity and gaming climate for JRPGs has significantly grown over the past 15 years or anything.
They should definitely just develop another generic anime game instead.
Oh, totally. Normally, I'm against video game developers discarding their innovative ideas completely in favor of sticking to what works. But this game rightly belongs in the trash.
Completely forget everything you know about breaking zones and all that other crap from 2, and instead we're treated to a more traditional RPG format, but with some new innovations inspired by the original.
You've got your standard physical attacks, ether attacks, and the newly repurposed tech attacks, which serve as situational purposes like afflicting tougher enemies with the new break status.
And no, it's not the same breaking nonsense. Instead, it's more like a stun gauge that builds up and cripples opponents, or you, from filling the bar to the max, making the broken character more susceptible to damage and temporarily left wide open for attacks until they recover.
You've also got access to a revamped boost gauge, where you can store and spend up to 3 charges to unleash extra powerful attacks. You can also once again plan out your moves in advance with a nifty turn order timeline in the UI.
Whew, I'm so glad that sounds like an actual RPG!
Yeah, luckily this title goes back to RPG basics, but also still manages to retain its unique personality from 1 and 2 attempted. But that does mean it's still got some stray dingleberries, like the awkward overworld trap mechanic.
I can't believe you just casually used the word dingleberries.
You do, however, get some more in-depth skill trees and more involved giant mech battles this time. And no RPG is complete without its skill trees and mech battles.
And drawn-out cutscenes wading through lengthy, chatty dialogue segments.
Ah, right! And we've got to kill God at the end.
Yeah, screw you, God! We're a hodgepodge group of intergalactic misfits. You think you're the boss of us?
Here's what I think of your omnipotence, Mr. Holier-than-Thou.
Suck an Easter egg! Hey, let's keep picking on episode 2.
I love beating off dead horses.
Don't you mean?
I mean that episode 3 basically does away with the awful aesthetic of episode 2 and instead finds a happy medium of 3D anime and realistic cartoon styles. I'm still on the horse thing. I mean it when I say that this is one of the best looking PS2 games out there. 1 was an early experimentation of 3D models with an anime aesthetic, and 2 awkwardly aimed for realism when the hardware wasn't ready for it yet. But 3 hits that perfect middle ground to maximize the PS2's limitations while also capitalizing on what worked well before.
Though, censorship certainly got in the way. Like with an odd scene in the English game where a young Shion is traumatized by the death of her mother and just cups her hands and keeps saying, "I need to put it back."
If you were playing the Japanese version, you would have seen blood everywhere, even pulled up in Shion's cupped hands as she's wondering how to put it back in her mother to save her.
Thanks for ruining the scene, ESRB. And by the way, the first 2 games both had blood and gore and were rated teen.
They also didn't want you to see Shion's butt in a shower scene. So yeah, this game was almost rated M because of some blood and a butt.
Man, the ESRB can go beat off a horse.
That's the spirit.
Honestly, it's the story that makes Xenosaga the cult classic that it is, and we want to spend a while talking about it here, especially considering how most players will never get the chance to experience it for themselves.
And since it clearly won't ever get an HD remaster ported to Switch or Steam, we might as well even forego any spoiler skips here since it's entirely unnecessary.
Did you hear that, Bandai Namco?
Here's your chance to make me look like an impatient dimwit horse beater! Also, just for posterity, you can also try to hunt down the DS remake, combining Xenosaga episodes 1 and 2, as well as watch the anime, mangling of the story of episode 1, before checking out 3. However, ultimately, the PS2 is the only place that you will be seeing episode 3. And for even more preposterous postulating posterity, Xenosaga Pied Piper was a Japan-exclusive mobile game that delved into the past and untold story of Ziggy, who gets oddly neglected throughout the series. Just in case you didn't think this series was inaccessible enough. Fortunately, his story hardly matters. Anyway, Xenosaga Episode 3 is effectively 4 JRPG stories crammed into one. Remember how Xenosaga was supposed to be 6 episodes long? Well, you'll certainly feel that while playing 3, as there are several moments where you will be floored with how much story you will be hit with all at once. I remember some cutscenes where you basically get infobomb after infobomb, just blasting the story forward like you wouldn't believe. I was repeatedly saying to myself, I bet that thing we just glossed over was intended to be an entire game. So anyway, we're gonna assume that by watching this video, you either know the stories of the first 2 games, or you've already watched our reviews of them. In either case, you should be well aware of how ridiculously in-depth Xenosaga goes with its story, so bear with us as we try our best to summarize the chaos into something more digestible. To even get a grasp of the story to begin with, I was constantly in and out of the in-game glossary, which was about as thick as a freaking phone book. Seriously, you could spend days reading up on the wikis for these games and still not fully grasp the overarching plot. Anyway, the show begins with a flashback chapter where the interdimensional Gnosis attack the city of Mictum before we get that huge info bomb, which basically equates to Shion investigating the mysteriously powerful Zohar, as well as the scheming immigrant fleet and Ormus, basically a cult of elitist religious nutcases who think that the Zohar belongs to them. It's here where Shion starts giving you the spark notes from the cut games. No kidding, she just blows through name-dropping new factions and plot twists left and right, bombarding you with information that all got downsized to fit this game's scope. Imagine trying to explain the entire story of Metal Gear Solid to someone in 4 minutes. That's what this feels like. Basically, Shion discovers her father was involved in a Vector-created cover-up of the Zohar, and that the ancient technology originated from their ancestors on Lost Jerusalem, the name of the planet where life originated, lost long ago to the ages, Earth. So Shion quits Vector and joins an anti-UMN rebel group after realizing that she was basically working for the bad guys. While still coordinating with her old Vector colleague Alan, who has since become the new chief, she witnesses a Federation military demonstration where Cosmos is pitted against her updated replacement unit, Telos, where Cosmos gets her tin can kicked in, resulting in her entire development to be canned as well, where the military promptly decides to literally throw her away in a garbage dump. Meanwhile, Junior, Momo, and the rest of the party members are attacked by a recurring bad guy who I swear doesn't know when to just die already, Margulis, who traps the cruise ship, the Elsa, in some energy thing right after they all manage to escape. At this point, they determine that the only way to recover their ship is with Cosmos' help. So they meet up with Shion and break into the Federation compound to salvage the discarded war machine, to the delight of all the traumatized fans who couldn't bear to watch Cosmos get thoughtlessly tossed in a dumpster. She was only gone for a hot minute, but it felt like ages. Unlike how long she was gone in 2, which actually was ages. So with the band back together, they attempt to recover the Elsa, where they get ambushed by Virgil, the Lieutenant Cosmos comically murdered in episode 1 because avoiding him when he stepped within her line of fire would slightly decrease her killing efficiency. Yeah, that guy. He's alive. Kinda. Right, so now he's calling himself a Testament. Things are left kind of vague on what that all means, and honestly, a lot of the game is like this. You're not supposed to be able to follow it all like we mentioned in our episode 1 review, but for those willing to read up on all the jargon, they will not be disappointed. So you beat this Organization 13 dude, and Telos appears, and absolutely puts Cosmos in her place. For how much the past games have built up how insanely powerful Cosmos is, watching her get so utterly crushed does nothing but set up how absurd Telos is. Then things start getting weird. Shion's pendant emits a bright flash of light, and everyone gets transported to Old Milsha, 15 years in the past. This is the planet that Shion grew up on, that suddenly vanished after a vicious Gnosis attack. This entire segment was probably intended to be its own game, as it reminds me a lot of episode 2, delving into Momo's memories, considering how that's basically what the party is doing again, but with Shion. Yeah, sorry to spoil that, but it's not real time travel. Alright, at least I think so. It's really weird. A lot happens, and believe me, we are skipping over a lot of it. So Shion takes this opportunity to investigate her father's corruption, track down Kevin, her former lover, and Cosmos' creator in order to help save the comatose android from her second humiliating defeat. But before the newly rebuilt Cosmos can be activated, another testament attacks the crew and attempts to kill Shion, which sets off some serious mommy alerts in the dormant death machine, awakening her just in time to save Shion and beat this guy into next Tuesday in an awesome redemptive cutscene where Cosmos finally joins your party. So after a lot of not important, old Milsha gets attacked by an army of Realians, basically a genetically engineered race that blur the line between human and machine. Well, they revolt and start murdering everyone, including the young Shion's parents. Yeah, we decided to break the #1 rule of time travel and meet ourselves. Due to the trauma, the young Shion screams and with a flash of light inexplicably summons the Gnosis to attack old Milsha. While overcome with grief that she's the one who brought upon this intergalactic apocalypse, her douchebag boyfriend Kevin reveals that he's also a testament, and that Shion's unnatural link with the Zohar through Cosmos is slowly killing her. As if the girl couldn't catch a break, the group is returned to the present, where they realize these testaments actually orchestrated this dive into Shion's memory, taking advantage of her strange power in order to have her unwittingly summon Abel's Ark, a mysterious spacecraft the size of an entire star system. Have we lost you yet? Because it only gets weirder. So this Ark is actually the observational gateway for the will of the universe, Udu, to witness and interact with this dimension. And it's Udu that's been speaking through the Zohar and Cosmos to Shion, giving her these unexplained visions and abilities. So in what was probably another entire game, the party challenges and stops several groups and villains from making contact with the Ark, all while fending off the Gnosis attacks, before ultimately they meet their match with Albedo, basically Junior's genetic brother and past overarching villain, who is revealed to be yet another testament in a final boss fight. But no, it is not over yet. So Albedo's consciousness somehow gets sucked into Junior's brain, where he warns the group that Abel's Ark is headed for Mictum. Taking his word for it, they head towards the planet at war, and in an effort to stop the other testaments from doing stuff. It's there that they face off against another testament, and this time he's a character from Ziggy's past, whom he, alongside the 2 other people in the world who actually played Pied Piper, recognized for a few seconds before defeating and forgetting about him forever. As if all this wasn't enough, Telos soon appears, revealing that she physically occupies the body of Mary Magdalene, the actual biblical character, while Cosmos houses Mary's consciousness, and she intends to defeat Cosmos in order to absorb this dormant will inside of her body and reawaken this ancient follower of— Jesus Christ, is this actually happening? You honestly didn't think this could get any weirder, did you? So luckily, with Cosmos' upgrades made back on old Milsha, which now that I think about it shouldn't have actually happened for real, are enough for the group to turn the tide against Telos and defeat her, which awakens Cosmos' dormant Mary persona, indicated by her eyes changing from red to blue. Aside from her huge personality shift, it is uncomfortable. Yeah, so apparently after thousands of years, our starbound descendants have all but completely lost all context and sense of any semblance of religion, which in our time, we ourselves have also lost to our own thousands of years of mistranslation and interpretation. Though the religious connection comes as a random shock, it makes a lot of sense when you realize that it's the last remnant of what these people have from their long-lost home planet. And being stupidly far in the future did nothing but distance them from what little we even know about in modern day, resulting in fanatical cults like Ormus to exist, persisting this ancient blind faith. Well, since the Bible is about as accurate as a history book as a Wikipedia entry on Roswell, the game takes the liberty in becoming more of an unbiased commentary on humanity's attempt at reaching out to a godlike power, which in this case is the unknowable otherworldly will of Udu. Getting back to the story, the group uncovers Zarathustra, a massive transdimensional rift between reality and Udu, powered by the Zohar, where Wilhelm, the leader of the Testaments, is waiting for Shion and Cosmos' arrival. He's been here all along in the story, kind of sprinkled about here and there. It just wasn't really important to mention until now. Speaking of not being important up till now, we've had another party member from the very beginning of episode 1 named Chaos. He was set up to have this weird superpower relating to the Gnosis before the game completely dropped that plot thread until, of all times, now. So I guess he's some sort of immortal, super powerful disciple of Udu or something wacky like that. Cause he and Wilhelm both seem to be the only two people who actually know what the heck is going on. Plus he's straight up seen hanging out on Lost Jerusalem in the super ancient past with Mary Magdalene, and Jesus Christ is actually a character in this game? Dude, that's not even the crazy part. So apparently Wilhelm is tasked with assuring that Zarathustra, with the will of Mary and the power of the Zohar, rewrite the universe in order to save it from being destroyed at the end of time. Apparently, he's been doing this an untold number of times now, as he and Chaos seem to be the only ones able to fully survive a loop. Excuse me? So, the universe will ultimately come to an end, and being immortal, this is basically the only thing that will inevitably end you. So Wilhelm aimed to not only get as close to Udu as possible during his infinite lifetime, but also find a way to game the outcome of the universe in his favor to live forever with near ultimate power at the expense of the free wills and lives of everyone and everything in the entire universe. What a douchebag. So he tortures Xion to command Cosmos, Mary remember, into enacting this will and causing the next loop. Kevin, a testament let's also remember, is a servant of Wilhelm, karate chops off Wilhelm's arm with his own arm. Because I guess torture bothers him, even though he was perfectly fine with torturing Alan himself just minutes beforehand. What a hypocrite. Wait, he actually karate chopped off a dude's arm? Oh yes, and with no blood, remember? It just kind of thunks onto the floor. Comedy gold. Best part of the entire game. How could it get any better than that? By Kevin then thrusting his arm inside of Wilhelm, believing that he could operate Zarathustra himself simply by having his arm inside of him. As if that means anything. I'm speechless. So that masochistic yaoi gore scene does nothing but activate Zarathustra, where the party has to face off against whatever this is for an intense final boss battle. Oh, so this is the final boss battle. I swear, I thought this game had like 5 final bosses, and it was over just before we moved on to the next overwhelming threat, and the final bosses just kept going. 4 RPGs in one, remember? Right. Anyway, you get this awesome scene where you think Mary is going to activate the universe-ending command, but instead Cosmos breaks through her own consciousness and takes command. And yes, I only mention this part because it's probably Kim's favorite moment in the entire series.
Very good. You have done well. With this, we will be able to live forever.
Cosmos!
What are you doing? You fool. Now this universe will be completely destroyed. Mary, is this what you really want?
I am not Mary. I am Cosmos.
Did we ever mention that Xion has a brother named Jin? Well, he dies after the group stops Zarathustra for good and fends off an onslaught of all the Gnosis in the universe converging on them all at once. Everyone escapes while Cosmos stays behind, taking on all the Gnosis alone, considering Jin's no help. During the chaos, the group manages to escape while all of space and time warps, erasing any connection to the UMN and freeing the Elsa from its force field. Yeah, remember that? But during their escape, Cosmos, as well as the rest of all the Gnosis, detonate in a massive explosion, and all we're left with is watching her mangled, limbless, cybernetic body floating in the cold vacuum of space, while Chaos's voice speaks to her through narration, assuring her that she can finally sleep, until the universe needs her once again. Until Super Smash Bros., right? Well, she does make a ridiculous amount of cameos in other games, including Xenoblade Chronicles 2. Man, my brain hurts. And that was just a quick summary? Oh, I left out dozens of hours of things to talk about, like all the philosophical and thematic concepts at work here, much less the actual story and characters I didn't even mention for the sake of this making even a little sense. How come the more I learn about Xenosaga, the less I understand? I am so relieved this section is finally over. I did it, Kim! Yeah, the music's good and all, but more importantly, the entire voice cast from episode 1 is back, reprising their roles. 2 really feels like this weird nightmare where everyone you know is replaced with their stunt doubles. The composer from episode 2 also returns for episode 3, which, as we mentioned in our review of 2, was basically the best part of the game, so that's definitely good to see. But more importantly, the original voice cast members! I already said that. It's a big deal! I loved Xenoblade Chronicles, and Kim loved Xenosaga. While talking about a few of our favorite games in college, we both found it weird how 2 of our favorite games' names were so similar but weren't related as far as we knew. Goes to show how easy it can be to lose touch with a franchise you love, or its own origins. No game is worth paying upwards of $1,000 to play, assuming you can get a functional PS2 on the cheap. And unfortunately, this great game is trapped in this outdated PS2 disc set. I was honestly shocked at how great Xenosaga Episode 3 was. If by some miracle you're able to get your hands on a copy, play it. Or at least take comfort in knowing that you can now legally emulate it instead. For the rest of you, I would recommend checking out some of the game movies people make on YouTube, compiling up-resed cutscenes and gameplay showcasing games like the Xenosaga trilogy. It's unfortunately the best and most affordable way that I can confidently recommend the series. Until we get that port, Bamco! The positive gamer in me enjoyed Xenosaga Episode 3 enough for a powerful 9 out of 10. Personally, I had a great time with this super in-depth RPG, as Kim and I got to play it all together while she was on controller duty, I was on glossary and wiki duty, and we both had a blast with this ludicrous sci-fi roller coaster ride. The critical gamer in me recognizes the huge steps forward in Xenosaga Episode 3 with a 7 out of 10. Though it still can have its lulls and lengthy cryptic exposition, this title offers just as much story to uncover and explore as it does combat, gameplay, and exploration, which is certainly welcome and impressive not only for its time, but for the genre as a whole. But what do you think? Tell us how your positive and critical sides rate Xenosaga Episode 3 in the comments below. Or if you even knew what the series was before we started reviewing it in the first place. Sure, I'm not seeing this series get ported anytime soon. But if you believe with all the crossovers and promotional works Bandai Namco pushes to continually show off their favorite RoboGal that they've somehow forgotten about Xenosaga, then you're just playing with yourself. Bomb! Oh, come on, we have a video due this week. Where are you? You were supposed to bring the game this time. Do you really want to play Other M that badly? Because I will. No. I got it. Hand it over. Conker's Bad Fur Day? What, did you go on a binge or something? I don't drink, dimwit. But then why are you... oh no, you didn't eat that old fermented applesauce, did you? I found some more. Of course you did. I love this game. You're slap happy already, aren't you? This game just makes me feel like I'm back in high school, staying up way too late with friends laughing so hard at the game we'd be in physical pain. Conker's Bad Fur Day tends to bring out the worst in people. Alright, if you don't already know what this game is, it's basically Banjo-Kazooie, but with copious amounts of crude British toilet humor and classic movie references. And let's not forget that this was made by the same people at Rare, confirming that none of them are above piss, crap, and testicle jokes. More importantly, the mere concept of an M-rated video game in that day and age, much less a Nintendo game. Dude, you can jump on this sunflower's boobs. We're the climate for censorship and mature themes. Opera singing poop monsters. This used to be an innocent franchise. Look what they've done to it. So the gameplay in Conkers isn't too different from Banjo-Kazooie. You're in a 3D action platformer progressing through various themed worlds, collecting money instead of jiggies in order to progress into new levels.
Playing as a lovable anthropomorphic woodland critter.
I mean, sure, but what does that matter?
It represents the forest creature community, you heartless speciesist.
So what sets the gameplay apart from the crowd
Is that you're feeding a mouse till he explodes, and pissing on flaming gremlins, and shooting zombie teddy bears, and dodging a redneck pitchfork until he gives into his depression and hangs himself, and—
No, it's not what you're doing.
It totally is.
It's also the fourth wall breaking implementation of the B button, where you'll encounter various platforms and interact with them by pressing B, allowing Conker to obtain whatever thing would be most beneficially context sensitive at that moment.
But it's always extra stupid. Like when you're getting attacked by a savage dinosaur in an arena and Conker pulls out a yo-yo to hypnotize the thing. It's never what you expect.
Based on the level, sometimes you're running, jumping, and smacking things with a giant frying pan, while other times you're in a third-person shooter, swimming, or surfing, and even flying, and it adds a lot of variety to the game. Although this tends to leave the difficulty all over the place.
Yeah, some segments are really hard, like when you gotta trick this raging bull to obliterate a bunch of cows after you gave them all diarrhea, and this Matrix scene where you're like jumping in slow-mo trying to shoot these evil weasel bankers.
Anyway, when you take damage, you'll need to find and eat some floating anti-gravity chocolate, or else you'll die.
And meet the Grim Reaper, who just might be my favorite character in the whole game, Greg. He's a small, squeaky-voiced, cat-hating Grim Reaper, reluctantly resurrecting you in exchange for squirrels' tails.
But even with ways to heal and return from death, this game can still be quite challenging. I think they cranked it up a bit to try and match their target age range and defy the stigma of looking like yet another kid's 3D platformer.
Kids should not play this game. Unless they're into violence and poop jokes, which all are, am I right? Ugh. You can see this caveman's butt hanging out.
You're not gonna be able to get over this game's humor for one section, are you?
Big bald British boiler.
The game looks great. It's a late N64 title making the most of the hardware with great colors, models, and fluid animations.
Count Batula.
Fine, here's your story section.
Yay! So Conker's totally wasted after a night out of drinking, and he's just trying to make his way back home, where he's constantly stopped by all sorts of crazy characters who need his help in exchange for money or opening the path forward.
Now this might sound like the dumbest thing you've ever heard, but the main villain is a Panther King who wants to capture Conker and use him as a table leg so he will stop dropping his milk, since his weasel assistant professor came to this conclusion after extensively studying the three-legged table.
So you help some bees and living farm equipment, kill a Terminator hay bale, screw over an angry cog and some prissy catfish, give some cows diarrhea, and stuff an opera-singing sentient poop monster full of toilet paper.
I'm just gonna let him handle this.
You sacrifice a cute baby dinosaur in a bloody ritual, bust an underground caveman nightclub, toss an angry mob into a metal grinder for your vampire ancestor, fight in a D-Day beach invasion against an army of Franken-teddies, rob a bank Matrix style before getting ambushed by the Weasel Mafia. So the Panther King has Conker's girlfriend Barry executed right before he has a xenomorph burst out of his chest, which nearly kills Conker when the game freezes. Conker makes a deal with the game programmer to help him kill the alien and is crowned the new king, but realizes after it's too late that he forgot to ask the programmer to also revive Barry, instead leaving him surrounded by the people he hates and at the same time completely alone.
Yeah, so you remember how Kingdom Hearts also throws you around a bunch of irrelevant worlds with no impact on the plot whatsoever until the very end?
This is the single greatest story ever told.
Bomb, get a hold of yourself!
This game makes me happy!
It's dumb.
It's the best kind of dumb!
Me. I am the swell gamer bomb who can't miss the chance to sing this song.
The music's just okay, so don't make this a Broadway. Hamster finds it wise to criticize.
You seem to forget that this game has full N64 voice tracks, no corners cut. If you're criticizing Hamster, just persist. I'll take this game and ram it up your butt.
My butt?
Your butt.
My butt?
That's right, your butt.
Ugh.
Your butt.
Ugh.
Your butt.
Public service announcement. The Great Mighty Pooh's song is titled Slaprano. Now you know.
This game was a financial disaster, what with the N64 being near the end of its lifespan alongside a peculiar ad campaign.
These are real promotional Conker's Bad Fur Day condoms. Part of me needs to know if anyone out there actually used one of them.
No, you don't!
I need to know! 10 out of 10! Bomb! The positive gamer in me gives Conker's Bad Fur Day an inebriated 6 out of 10. 9 out of 10. It's funny, but I like it. It's dumb and awful and offensive, and it's the greatest game ever made. So it gets the highest score number ever made with a 9 out of 10. Look at all those coins.
The critical gamer in me gives Conker's Bad Fur Day an average 5 out of 10. Yeah, the game's hysterical, but the gameplay itself kind of drags down the experience, keeping me from wanting to return to it. Unless you hunt down the 2005 remake, Conker Live and Reloaded, which spruces up the graphics and gameplay in a big way, at the cost of some unnecessary censorship. And would you look at that? Now we don't have to review that game at all!
No! You'll get over it. Ugh. What do you think? Tell us how your positive and critical sides rate Conker's Bad Fur Day in the comments below. But if you're just playing with yourself,
Bomb, I didn't even...
Goodbye!
Oh wait, hold on, I wasn't even done!
Alright, Mac, grab that NES controller and show me what you got. And don't give me that look like you can't beat him. This guy's a chump. You've beaten Castlevania. You've beaten Zelda 2. You've beaten Lost Levels, and Ghosts and Goblins, and Ninja Gaiden. And who even is this guy? Glass Joe? This dweeb's got no chance in... Oh, you've gotta be kidding me.
Now this is a story on video where Hamster finally beats Glass Joe, just like Mario 64 threw Bowser into the air, or how Geralt from The Witcher beat the Beast of Beauclair. Yeah, it's nothing like that at all.
Come on, man, it's Punch-Out! People literally speedrun this game blindfolded.
Yeah, that's great and all, but I can't beat the first guy with my eyes wide open.
With how many brutal NES games you've beaten, I don't believe that for 1 second. Now you listen real good, and I'll show you how it's done.
In a boxing tournament, you attack as the puny brawler from the Bronx, Little Mac. B is your left and A is your right, and the D-pad lets you dodge while you fight. Be sure to land those punches and wait for the tell. Knock him down until the ref rings the bell. You got one little fight with a scrawny square, so just
Whoop his baby butt back into daycare!
yeah! Now that's more like it. I'm still getting schooled over here. Baby steps. Poor choice of words. Something notable about this game's art style is that the arcade cabinets were designed specifically with 2 monitors in mind, considering how Nintendo needed to get rid of a ton of excess screen somehow, and Punch-Out was born. Also with 2 exclamation points. The top screen displayed all the information like the fighter's health and time remaining, leaving the bottom screen plenty of room to display the action. Though the NES version does a decent job at replicating the arcade effect, the later version released on the SNES, Super Punch-Out, does the first-person transparent player effect best. The series also got revitalized in a big way on the Wii, where the graphics and gameplay got cleaned up nicely in yet another reboot. But when people talk about Punch-Out, they're talking about the original. And since I can't even seem to beat the first lousy challenger, I'm just gonna have to look up the rest.
Wait, no, you can't just...
Here's my impressions for all of them. The most pitiful, scrawny weakling imaginable, making my embarrassing losing streak against him all the more painful. The German dude with suspenders and a huge mustache. The obligatory Asia, the sex. The one who's so overweight he's savagely crowned king of hippos. The Indian whose name, Great Tiger, sounds Indian, but not Indian like Native American, sorry we forgot the wrong country for 300 years Indian. The huge guy whose most defining feature is his lack of hair. The flat out racist character,
Get this Russian dude was straight up named Vodka Drunkinsky, who even drank between bouts. He got censored into the new persona of Soda Popinski, where they literally wrote pop on the vodka he drinks to lazily cover it up. But the real question is, what would ever compel a human being to name their own child vodka? The outlier's so ahead of the times, he's the antonym of racist. This man isn't stereotyped by the color of his skin, or even awkwardly forced to cling to the country of his ancestors, but instead, he's simply American. From the land of the free and the home of the brave. The old dude in the banana hammock, the real-life Mike Tyson. One other Nintendo game has a real-life convicted rapist and registered sex offender as the final boss. Seriously, just think about that for a minute.
As if you'll ever get a chance to fight them anyways.
Damn you, Glass Joe! There is no story. There's like 1 or 2 tracks in the whole damn game. And I guess they're okay, but guess what? I don't care. You keep getting slaughtered, I'll get your wheelchair. A gift from Glass Joe as the Prince of Despair. What? Wait, who was this guy? Oh god, I forget! You know, you'd probably do a lot better if you took off those oven mitts. Wanna be better than me at a game? Basically just boot up Punch-Out and you're practically there. Yes, I honestly have beaten some of the hardest NES games ever, like Ninja Gaiden, Castlevania 3, and Ghosts and Goblins. But this game absolutely puts me in my place. So if you do manage to become champion and beat the game, you get this extremely concerning newspaper clipping where, and I swear to God this is real, Mario's abandoned family shows his picture next to a headline reading, quote, "Daddy, come back home." So your reward for victory is uncomfortable proof that Mario is a deadbeat dad running away from his responsibilities to referee boxing matches, race go-karts, and play tennis and golf with his new girlfriend? I have so many questions! Well, the positive gamer in me ranks Punch-Out with a 3 out of 10. To be honest, I just don't have enough fun with this game to justify getting any better at it. And I'm not even a boxing fan, but this game lets you fight a real-life rapist and reveal that Mario's a deadbeat dad, so that certainly counts for something. The critical gamer in me gives Punch-Out an above-average 6 out of 10. This odd retro game added much-needed personality and character to an otherwise bland setting and left its mark in retro gaming history and especially for the speedrunning community, all because Nintendo wanted to throw away some monitors. But what do you think? Tell us how your positive and critical sides rate Punch-Out in the comments below. But if you're too proud to throw in the towel and accept failure every once in a while, then you're just playing with yourself. What's up, Bomb? Hamster! You won't believe where I am now! Dunkin' Donuts. What? No! Topeka, Kansas. No. I hear a lot of rushing air. The bathroom. No! The Republic of Yemen. Yeah, warmer. A desert in the Republic of Yemen. Bingo! I'm also 40,000 feet in the air dangling from the back of a cargo plane and probably about to plummet to my death, but wow, you are a really good guesser! Don't you have a parachute? No, I just have a cell phone. Why do you think I called you? What do you expect me to do, catch you? It'd be nice. Hamster? Hamster! Oh, man, not again! Oh, I can't hold out any look. Whoa! Why does this keep happening to me? He's totally in the bathroom. Well, here we are once again reviewing another Uncharted game. But I've got this feeling like we've done this one before. Nuh-uh, this is totally different. You see, last time I was wrapped up in an Invader Zim fleece blanket, but this time it's Nightmare Before Christmas. So we're playing Uncharted, 3, Drake's Deception. Wait, isn't that the subtitle to another one? You're thinking of Drake's Fortune. So he was fortunate before he was deceived? Well, not exactly. Because after playing it a while, my head's kind of blurring the lines between 2 and 3. Actually, Drake's Fortune was 1. I'm saying I'm honestly forgetting which game had which scene since they all seem so interchangeable. Which game had that big vehicle crash off the cliff? I think they all kinda did. Ugh, even 4, and we're not even there yet. So this time,
Uncharted 3's gameplay is nearly identical to that of 2's, which itself is only a moderate upgrade from 1's.
but this time you have a few new combat abilities, like dropping on guys with aerial attacks and throwing live grenades back at the bad guys.
You honestly sound like EA trying to sell the next FIFA.
Come on, you know Uncharted's gameplay is just as fun now as it was last time. What do you even want changed anyway? It's fine as it is.
EA Sports. We changed the number on last year's Madden. That'll be $60, please.
Not the same! Uncharted 3's graphics.
This game looks identical to the last one.
Now come on, there are so many more colorful, active, and fully realized set pieces for all the action this time around.
That's kind of more the story's doing. The game technically looks nearly identical to 2. If you didn't know the story, I doubt you could identify 2 from 3 from screenshots alone.
Okay, I'm looking it up, and Naughty Dog says right here that it's running on an evolved engine from 2 with a ton of upgrades like having much better physics and visual effects like smoke, fire, water, and even dust and sand.
I guess?
Yeah, it's better, right?
Wait, which one was 3 again?
Oh my god.
Hey look, the reason to watch this video.
Come on, we're doing a fair review here.
Fine, well keep in mind we're obviously gonna talk about the story, so you've been warned for some upcoming spoilers. And I assure you that this won't be the same as the last games. Well, unless you count story beats and tropes, which in case it'll be nearly identical to an uncanny degree.
The story begins with the treasure hunting duo Nate and Sully meeting with the shady businessman Talbot in London in order to make an exchange. Nate's prized ring, once belonging to Sir Francis Drake, for a suitcase packed with cash. The deal goes sour when Nate accuses Talbot of offering fraudulent banknotes, and a crazy bar fight ensues, resulting in the ring getting stolen by Talbot for his employer Marlowe, and Nate and Sully getting shot and left for dead in the back alleys of London.
Well, we just started and the main characters are dead. Guess all that we have left to do now is
flashback 20 years to Nate as a teenager, where he attempts to steal the ring from a Colombian museum. It's here where he's first tailed by Marlowe and her goons as they attempt to steal the ring back from the young thief. But before her hired henchman tailing the cornered Nate can shoot and kill him, Nate is saved by Sully, who defects from Marlowe's group and takes on Nate as a protege.
That's nice and all, but they still both end up dead in the streets of London.
And after we flash back to London, we see that Nate and Sully are both okay, as the hired goon who shot them, Cutter, was actually their inside man on the job, helping them stage the whole event to make Marlowe believe they were dead, and make a quick exchange so that a fake ring would be stolen instead of the authentic one.
Geez, how many times does Uncharted pull the, oh my gosh, this character's dead, but psych, not really trope? I mean, for Sully in particular, it's like a tradition at this point.
Yeah, and it's not even the last time!
You mean 4, right?
No, this game.
Oh my god.
Anyway, alongside Cutter and Chloe, their getaway driver, the group tail Marlowe's men into a mysterious underground library, jam-packed with secret historical artifacts, where they discover Sir Francis's map, divulging the details of his journey to Arabia to find the lost city of Ubar for Queen Elizabeth. However, he would later cover up everything about this voyage, leaving only vague clues for Nate and the rest to decipher what happened on the secret quest to uncover the lost city of riches.
Yeah, this sounds familiar.
Finding 2 leads, the group decides to split up and cover both. Nate and Sully head to an abandoned French chateau, while Cutter and Chloe head to a Syrian citadel. After some investigation, Nate discovers half an amulet buried in a hidden crypt beneath the mansion, but gets ambushed by Talbot and his men, who clearly followed the pair to steal their findings and leave them trapped in the building as they set it all on fire in spectacular Uncharted fashion.
Yes, the escape sequences of running and jumping up crumbling, burning buildings is awesome and all, but you skipped over a little segment I'd like to make note of. So while discovering the amulet, Nate and Sully get attacked by a river of giant spiders. They seem highly aggressive and very well coordinated, and definitely unnatural as well, as they find one of Talbot's men's decomposing bodies, and it's all green and zombie-like. Just, keep it in mind.
Anyway, realizing that Cutter and Chloe were probably followed as well, they quickly rejoin the pair in Syria to help them uncover the other half of this strange amulet, which helps them track down their next clue in Yemen. However, Talbot and Marlowe are hot on their tracks, going so far as to drug Cutter with a potent dart to sabotage Nate's efforts, and even force Cutter to jump off a roof and break his leg or die burning alive for backstabbing them. Yikes. Once again, while uncovering the second piece of the puzzle, they're attacked by these same giant spiders. And now it's not just a weird giant jungle spider from France, as we've seen them on entirely different continents. So understandably, Cutter backs out alongside Chloe, leaving Nate and Sully no choice but to recruit their old partner Elena to help them uncover the location of the tomb that they kinda just happened to stumble across right away and entirely by accident in the middle of a populated area, somehow left completely undisturbed and unlocked. And no, this is not actually an ambush, it's just a plot oversight for a gag.
What?
So they make it to the bottom of this tomb and discover an elaborate astrological map that, thanks to Sully's time in the Navy, they recognize as a specific place. Sully commits it to memory to avoid having the information stolen by Talbot and Marlowe, who, of course, followed them yet again. But upon their escape, they are chased by
More of those freaking spiders?
Yeah, now that's definitely not just a coincidence.
Are you sure? Because here's the kicker. They never explain the spiders. There is one you can find preserved in a jar in the opening secret library, hinting that this organization bred and planted them all there. But then why didn't they already confiscate the artifacts from those locations if that were true? I found a plot hole! Moving on, the group exits the tomb and Nate immediately gets shot by the same dart that drugged Cutter earlier. Losing his mind temporarily, he freaks out and runs off through the bustling streets of Yemen in this warped, delirious state, losing Sully and Elena in the chaos. Okay, this part's pretty cool. Through his hysteria, Nate is captured and unwittingly tells Talbot and Marlowe everything he's discovered, and that Sully's memorized the location of the lost city. He's then taken by the pirate Ramses, who attempts to torture Nate into revealing more information. After breaking free, Nate learns of Sully's capture and chases down Ramses on his departing hijacked cruise liner in hopes of saving Sully from the wrath of the pirate. So it turns out Sully was captured, but not by the pirate. So yeah, it was an elaborate trap, all banking on Nate escaping his own captive torture and tracking down the ship, imminently setting sail into the storm guarded by dozens of armed thugs. Yeah. So because Nate is basically a living natural disaster, the ship is damaged in an explosive firefight and quickly takes on water. The level design here gets really diverse as you're running from rushing water, swimming and escaping dead ends, and platforming through the ship's interior turned over on its side. Granted, I do get a little tired of the overused Crash Bandicoot style run towards the screen, you can't see a foot in front of you but screw up once and it's all over segments. Long story short, the entire ship gets destroyed in a spectacular fashion, taking Ramses with it, and Nate barely manages to escape, clutching onto a wooden board cast adrift onto the stormy sea. This would spell certain death for any normal human being. But Nathan Drake conveniently washes up alive, beached right in front of the hotel Elena is staying at while searching for him, so he can stumble his way back into the story right away because he's wearing the absolute pinnacle of plot armor. Elena informs Nate that Sully was actually captured by Marlowe and is being forced to lead them to Ubar. She then assists Nate in sneaking aboard a cargo plane carrying supplies to Marlowe's convoy. And since this is Uncharted, by sneaking, I mean they do this during takeoff. Everybody grab your parachutes, Nathan Drake just boarded an airplane.
Yeah, so Nate gets spotted, and after a brawl/shootout with the onboard goons, he's sent dangling from the back of the open cargo door of the plane in flight, and the entire plane succumbs to the firefight damage, breaks apart midair, and plummets to the desert below, where Nate, mid-free fall, has to dive towards a cargo crate and activate its safety parachute in order to land safely. All gameplay.
I would give it crap for being another obvious vehicle doomed to crash in spectacular fashion while our action hero barely survives yet again, but this is probably my favorite segment in the entire series. It's got several sequences where you swear you're watching a "you died" cutscene, only to be surprised that you're actually still in gameplay clinging to survival, and that's the most Uncharted feeling I can possibly imagine. After wandering the desert aimlessly, hallucinating, hearing voices, and going in circles, Nate is rescued by a nomadic Bedouin named Salim after wandering into a firefight in a desert ghost town. Salim explains that the city of Ubar is a cursed place, where King Solomon once imprisoned an evil djinn inside a vessel that corrupted the city into ruin. Wait, this guy just casually knows about the lost city of Ubar? I mean, it's not like he knows exactly where it is, too, right? It's lost! Oh my god. So together, Nate and Salim rescue Sully from the convoy and get separated in a sandstorm. From there, Nate and Sully discover the glorious city in the desert, Iram of the Pillars.
Basking in the glory of the city, Nate takes a drink from the surprisingly clean waters of its fountains before witnessing a sudden solar eclipse. And before the two even know what hit them, Sully is shot in the heart and falls to the ground dead.
Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, well, that's how you open the game. Fool me thrice, and honestly, I'm more inclined to believe that Sully is impervious to bullets.
Suddenly, Talbot and his men ambush Nate, and he flies into a fit of rage. Talbot escapes and Nate gives chase, but during which he starts seeing things like flaming guards, not homosexual, like on fire flaming, and suddenly being in entirely different places and times and getting chased by those godforsaken spiders again. Nate eventually wakes up from his now apparent illusion trip, where the real living Sully informs Nate that the water contains a strong hallucinogenic that Nate realizes must originate from the cursed vessel cast into the city, contaminating the water supply.
At least the sci-fi twist is somewhat believable this time around. But if the hallucinogenic in the water basically has the same effect as that drug the Dart from before, then why does Marlowe need it so badly in the first place if she's already got the exact same reproducible power?
Look, Mom, another plot hole! So apparently after learning of the power of the Djinn, Sir Francis Drake lied to the Queen about this discovery to cover it up from the world. Marlowe, however, who, once again, got here simply by tailing Nate, thinks it's stupendous and hoists the vessel out of the deep well water supply of the city. And with 3 random shots from Nate's flare gun, the crane drops the vessel and sets off a chain reaction, destroying the entire city in a massive sinkhole.
Okay, hold up. I can get behind some of the contrived stuff for the sake of exciting escape sequences, but this is a little much. Also, isn't this the second time now a super ancient lost city could have simply been discovered by anybody with Google Maps and a drone without all this national treasure nonsense? Whatever, carry on.
Marlowe falls in a sinkhole herself, dragging down the real ring of Sir Francis Drake with her. And during the crumbling city chaos, the now hysterical Talbot attempts to kill Nate with a knife in sorta a kind of final boss fight. But unlike the last games, this one's more like a fist fight with a series of quick time events and a short climbing section.
Then you just kind of grab a gun and shoot him, and that's it. He falls into the sand and you escape. I never really liked Talbot. He's designed to be a hateable guy, yeah, but he kind of got done dirty in this fight.
As they escape, Salim appears and rescues the pair as they all watch what's left of the city crumble away and sink into the desert below.
Hold up, he did know where this city was? They got separated, and he found them because he knew where the city was. It's not a lost city if people know where it is!
So I neglected to mention that since the events of the last game, Nate and Elena got married but split up. Sully confesses to Nate that he always thought of him as a son, and held on to Nate's wedding ring because he knew that he'd eventually regret leaving Elena and wish he could make things right again. And that's exactly what he does, as the pair reunite for the 3rd time now, and since the ironic tradition is getting palpable enough, they all pile into Sully's refurbished original plane from Uncharted 1 and head home.
There's never really a lot of character development in Uncharted, although this time Sully does get that nice moment by the end. The rest of the time, people are just trying to convince Nate that he's going too far with his dream and he should just give up, and since he's so stubborn, he just keeps at it anyway. The only real character moments are like with Nate and Elena at the end, getting back together, but that isn't exactly character development, but more so required for the token cinematic scenes. But I still love it just the same. Yeah, so do I. The music in Uncharted 3 is just as spectacular. I've been playing music from 2 this entire time because I knew you wouldn't be able to even tell the difference.
Wait, what? Oh, come on, that's not even fair! It's still great though, right?
Oh yeah, sure, if you don't mind your brain scrambling all the music together in your head. 2 really had some great music, didn't it? I'm joking, this is actually from 3.
You little...
Kitty got wet.
It's all about the journey and not the destination. It doesn't matter what awaits you and the group at the Lost City Vu Bar, but what does is the intense roller coaster that'll get you there.
If you enjoyed Uncharted 2, then rejoice, as Uncharted 3 is effectively the exact same game, but with a new coat of paint. Okay, with an eerily familiar but subtly different coat of paint.
This game is an absolute thrill. I'd even go so far as to say it's my favorite of the original 3 games, but
your brain keeps blurring the lines between it and the other ones?
Is that a bad thing?
They're all awesome! Even so, I'd still admittedly buy, play, and love the same rehashed, formulaic, yet new Uncharted games where Naughty Dog's still making them today.
The positive gamer in me had a blast with the thrilling Uncharted 3, giving it a legendary 10 out of 10. This game is a decade old now, but still outclasses a tremendous amount of modern AAA titles, and that is nothing short of impressive. If you haven't treated yourself to this amazing world of Uncharted, then you surely are missing out. The critical gamer in me is conflicted between my minor criticisms and sheer amazement with Uncharted 3, still awarding it with a treasured 9 out of 10. Naughty Dog managed to catch lightning in a bottle twice when it comes to this action-packed thrill ride of a series. And though a few admittedly petty gripes keep me from dishing out a perfect score, this entry remains as nothing less than monumental. Isn't that exactly how we rated Uncharted 2? Fitting, isn't it, how we can't even tell the difference anymore? Well, what do you think? Tell us how your positive and critical sides rate Uncharted 3 Drake's Deception in the comments below. Sometimes a series doing the same thing again can be just as great as when they did it the first time. But if you think Uncharted 3 is the result of franchise stagnation, then you're just playing with yourself. And by the way, it was all music from Uncharted 2.
Oh my god!
I probably should have washed this burp cloth before I wore it.
Masochism, noun. 1. Gratification gained from pain, deprivation, degradation, etc., inflicted or imposed on oneself, either as a result of one's own actions or the actions of others, especially the tendency to seek this form of gratification. 2. The act of turning one's destructive tendencies inward or upon oneself. 3. The act of willingly and unironically playing ghosts and goblins. Honestly, now I'm just a computer, but I'm starting to get very concerned about your mental well-being, you sick demented sack of self-loathing and anguish. Stop hurting yourself. Nobody cares.
Ghosts and Goblins. Originally released in the arcades in 1985, it would later be ported to virtually everything that could run it at the time, most notably the Nintendo Entertainment System. The game was known for its absurd and borderline unfair quarter-swallowing difficulty, even on home consoles.
And I beat it!
And as we just clearly cited with the intro, only means you hate yourself.
Well, yes, but there is a lot of fun to be had while playing a game this difficult. The stakes are incredibly high, so you need to be on your A game the entire time to survive, giving you tremendous amounts of self-satisfaction and accomplishment when you do succeed.
So, you did beat it twice for the real ending, right?
What? Oh, shut up. That sounds like the dumbest schoolyard prank I've ever heard.
Nah, it says right here that beating the game once only gives you a false ending.
Okay, I admit when I beat it, I kind of blacked out.
And the only way to get the real ending is by beating the entire game a second time.
Wait, you're serious?
Does this look like the face of mercy?
Oh my god, is it any harder the second time?
Nope, it's exactly the same. Probably because it's not possible for it to even get any harder in the first place.
Bring it on, Satan! It's time for round 2!
What's wrong with you?
It's in my blood!
What is? Hatred?
Yes!
We already mentioned it, but it begs repeating. This game is hard.
It's the good kind of hard.
Debatable. Anyway, Ghosts and Goblins is a side-scrolling platformer with various projectile weapons at your disposal to deal with the onslaught of enemies thrown your way. Luckily, the game's 6 levels are all generally short.
The challenge comes in dodging or defeating the barrage of enemies as you make your way through the levels. There's so many different creature types, projectiles, and bizarre movement patterns that keeping track of it all without losing your composure can be the real challenge.
Well, since you're kinda running and gunning, this game kinda plays like Capcom's other retro property, Mega Man. However, unlike Mega Man, Arthur can only hold one weapon at a time. Granted, it has infinite ammo, but if you so much as accidentally touch a weapon you didn't want, sorry. That weapon is gone, and you need to live with your mistakes.
And weapon drops are totally random. To make matters worse, if you accidentally grab a weapon you don't like and die, you'll respawn holding that new weapon. However, this does make hanging onto a good weapon a lot easier, assuming you avoid every other weapon drop like the plague from then on.
There's the lance you start with, which is alright. The dagger, also known as the knife, is a straight up better lance, throwing faster and dealing more damage.
the torch, which chucks powerful fireballs but can only have 2 burning on screen at once, the axe, which is also limited to 2 projectiles on screen at once but can pass through enemies, which in my opinion makes it kinda worse, and the shield, which we'll talk about later. Early on, I like grabbing the torch as it can take out powerful enemies like the Red Devils with a few well-placed rapid shots. But no matter what, if you can get your hands on the dagger, don't you dare ever let go, as that puny blade is by far the best weapon in the entire game due to its crazy speed and power. But don't kid yourself if you're thinking it's gonna make this game easy. Several bosses are even completely immune to certain weapons like the axe or lance, so getting the torch, or more importantly, the dagger, is critical to your survival. Unless you like arriving at boss battles only to discover that your weapon does absolutely nothing. Speaking of the bosses, they start becoming regular enemies, scattered through later levels as if this game weren't already ridiculously hard enough. Beating levels will allow you to start at the beginning of the next one perpetually, even after a game over, which is super generous. Your lives are basically there to help you get to and spawn at the various checkpoints after death, making completing the levels that much more bearable. And it's because of this one simple implementation that made me go from laughing at this game's absurdity to wanting to actually beat it. It's a crazy challenge, yes, but at least the game is fair enough in allowing the player to keep trying without overly punishing them for failure. At least that part's fair, because we haven't mentioned what truly makes this game so obnoxiously hard. Arthur isn't the tankiest of knights. With just one hit, he loses his armor and comically runs around in his underwear. With a second hit, he loses his life, crumbling into a pile of bones. That's right. There's an onslaught of enemies and projectiles, ducking and weaving all over the screen, tricky platforms, climbing sections to navigate, clunky jumping controls with a boss at the end of it all, and you can only get hit twice. And if all that weren't bad enough, when you finally beat the level 6 boss, you'll be greeted by this lovely message. This weapon has not effect. Okay, try again, get a shield. And as punishment for falling for this beginner's trap, you're sent all the way back to the start of level 5! That's like Ninja Gaiden Act 6 levels of unfair! To make matters worse, Stage 6 is absurdly tough as it is, and the slow, crappy shield weapon is just not gonna cut it. The only way I ever beat this was by clearing the entire path forward with the dagger, then running all the way back for the shield, then back up to the boss to finish them. Yes, killing all the Red Devils and past bosses now casually masquerading as normal enemies is stupid hard, but the real challenge in this level is beating the timer. Yeah, you're also timed in this game, and it's not generous. I'll tell you right now that beating level 6 with the shield is by far the hardest part of the entire game, because the final boss encounter afterwards is actually hilariously easy. You just back up and spam attack and he'll die in seconds. But even so, crap like this can still happen. But don't worry, you still win and get greeted by this lovely message. Congratulations! This story is happy end. Nice try, Japan. So yeah, the game's hard! I find the jumping to be the clunkiest of all, since you can't move or control Arthur after jumping. Once you've jumped, you've committed, and more often than not, jumping excessively will only lead to your death. Oh yes, the controls are awful, the levels are unfair and even breakneck difficult, but I still enjoy this game. It's just forgiving enough to make you feel the intense urge to overcome its challenges. Yeah, maybe if you're a maniac. This game looks good enough for being as old as it is. Especially from being ported to the Commodore 64, Amiga, and the NES, it still holds up that arcade look relatively well. But what the heck is up with the enemies? You start with zombies, skeletons, and Little Shop of Horrors plants, before getting swarmed by screaming pigs in a blanket? Ghost knights that whiz around the screen like Hyper Medusa heads from Castlevania? And a giant hulking ogre apparently named the Unicorn? Oh, you want to get into the boss's names? How about the boss of Stage 5, aptly named Satan? Then the boss of Stage 6, 2 Satans. Yes, you heard me right, 2 Satans. And then, if you beat them with the shield for your final boss, the Devil, also known as, and I love this, Great Satan. So you've got Satan, Double Satan, and Great Satan. I can't wait for one of them to get anime hair and go full on Super Satan. There's also a bunch of other items you can pick up that basically amount to nothing but points, so in the context of a game this hard, nobody cares. But I love that aside from the money bags and, no kidding, dolls that you collect, you can also collect the princess's accessories. While getting kidnapped, she apparently dropped everything from her jewelry to her tiara, and must have gotten stripped bare as well, as you can also find her slippers, dress, and even her underwear. Funny how she's still fully clothed once you rescue her. They should have pulled a reverse Metroid ending or something if they were gonna go there with her clothes. Nah, they just wanted 8-bit flashing underwear. Arthur and Princess Prin are hanging out in the cemetery alone, where Satan suddenly appears and kidnaps the princess. Arthur suits up, considering he was just laying there in his underwear, and immediately the onslaught of ghosts and goblins begins. He was just hanging out with the princess in his underwear in a secluded location? Yeah, why? Arthur just got cock-blocked by Satan. Well, that explains his tenacity, as the guy then has to venture through hell itself to save the princess, defeating all sorts of monsters and demons in his path. And eventually, after defeating the devil, not Satan, remember, we killed 3 of them just getting here. Aren't they supposed to be the same? Shut up. So you get this false ending bullcrap. This room is an illusion and is a trap devised by Satan. But we just killed them. Yeah, I know. Go ahead dauntlessly. Make rapid progress. With one S, apparently. Didn't they even spell check this game? So you're forced to beat the entire game all over again. And you know you're on the second run when you start with the shield, which you better get rid of fast, considering the unicorn, the first boss, is impervious to the shield, by the way. That's evil. So after dredging through that entire ungodly slog for a second time, you're finally given a proper ending. Or, well, you get an ending. What do you mean? You read it. Being the wise and oh my god. Keep going, it gets better. Courageous knight that you are, randomly some extra spaces, you feel strongeth welling, period, in your body, period, return to starting point, challenge again. That right there made the entire journey worth it. Satan kidnapped and stripped your girlfriend and sent you on a ridiculous gauntlet endurance run through hell itself twice! Yet I still feel strongeth welling. Every single track in this game just makes me want to scream. Ignoring the fact that listening to it while you play a crazy hard game makes your Pavlovian response to it so morbid, how is it really? It sounds like a cat running across a pipe organ. Which version, the arcade, NES, or? They all sound like that. And speaking of the other versions, how come when the game got a sequel for the next generation like the Super Nintendo, the series got changed to Ghouls and Ghosts? That was clearly an illusion devised by Satan. Yeah, these people are about as illiterate as a boomer on 4chan. This game is way too difficult to recommend. Unless you play it with friends or just enjoy the pain, you can skip this one. Does your Courageor leave your strongeth welling? Don't be tempted to complete an absurdly hard game just for a stupid end screen somebody typed with boxing gloves. In your body? Stop hurting yourself. The positive gamer in me is scared to admit I give Ghosts and Goblins an average 5 out of 10. I don't know what's wrong with me, but I admit to randomly pulling this game up every once in a while for a good time with friends. It is, however, so unjustifiably hard, it's mostly become more of a meme than a game to me. And though the game isn't great, the meme sure as heck is. The critical gamer in me gives Ghosts and Goblins a 4 out of 10. This game was designed to swallow quarters, and honestly, judging it from that alone, there are dozens of better games to sink money into the arcade cabinets than this, considering how those games are actually fun to play. The qualities that make this game so memorable are the same qualities that make it a bad video game. Well, what do you think? Tell us how your positive and critical sides rate Ghosts and Goblins in the comments below. But if you believe a game is bad due to its difficulty alone, then yourself feel playeth welling. I can't.
I distinctly recall asking my parents back in 2006 for a new DS game like Mario Kart or Metroid Prime Hunters, but when my birthday finally rolled around, what I ended up getting was Big Brain Academy. It's like an overweight person ordering a cheeseburger and getting a salad instead. It's like someone who keeps offering you breath mints, or workout equipment, or joke t-shirts only the gift giver thought were funny, or any other unintended passive-aggressive subtle jabs at your self-esteem in gift form. You don't just gift somebody Big Brain Academy.
The game's pretty good though.
Oh yeah, totally. Thanks, Mom. This sounds like the absolute worst. An educational game entirely structured around touchscreen interaction? Ugh. But once you realize the main problem, among many, with IQ tests and the like is their inherent lack of any way to really test the actual speed of the brain's problem-solving response time. Instead, it's held back with reading or intellectual handicaps skewing the results. Unless, of course, you have a touchscreen. Okay, fair, but still, man, it's an educational game. I wanted to go race go-karts and shoot stuff. Dude, I could be gaming. Just think of it as an arcade game where the goal is to think as fast as possible, which compounds on the fact that your profile's top score will be openly displayed next to anybody else's sharing the game. Are you telling me that after calling my family idiots for years, I can finally prove it? Or eat your words.
Bring it on, you morons!
Hey, you're right, this game is actually pretty fun. See, I told you, you beat my score? I always said they were all snot-gobbling dimwits choking on their own drool, and now look who's undeniably proven to be the only possessor of any competent brain matter in this household! In Big Brain Academy, you'll create your profile primarily to compare test results from person to person because honestly the most fun part about this game is the competitive nature of telling your siblings they're stupid and being proven right. So you choose between Test Mode, which is a series of minigames resulting in a high score, Practice Mode, which allows you to practice the said minigames, and Versus Mode, where 2 to 8 players can wirelessly race to solve puzzles the fastest. And yeah, that's basically it. You'll be spending most of your time in test, or hammering out the finer details of a tricky minigame in practice in order to give you the edge on the next test to raise your score. There are 5 categories of minigames with 3 puzzles for each. Think, which is logic-based, Memorize, which is obviously memory-based, Analyze, which is about reason and deduction, Compute, which is effectively math, and Identify, which is visual-based. But all of them are about time. The faster you solve the puzzle, the higher your score will be in the end. So this being a touch-based game actually helps this out a lot in terms of reaction time. Now, though I tend to hate games with timers giving me needless anxiety, but for an IQ test game, this is absolutely essential. The game is all about overcoming your self-conscious anxiety and simply focusing on solving problems in rapid succession, and fighting for the top score amongst your family. Because nothing's healthier in a familial setting than blatantly slapping labels on everyone, organizing them by literal brain mass. Yeah, you're scored with points that add up to give you a total brain mass in grams. This then gives you a letter grade and generates a suitable profession based on which category you excelled in the most. To keep up the pretense of this being a comically ineffective school standardized test, I presume. Here's my actual profile page from when I was 16. If you didn't think this game sounded very fun, then try beating my score for a challenge. Because if you're not setting personal goals for yourself, then you'll get bored faster than you can say algebra. Wait, but the average human brain only weighs about 1,300 grams.
Yeah, so? You should be proud of your accomplishments.
What's with your freakishly large 16-year-old brain being 25% bigger than the average adults?
It ain't easy being top-heavy.
This game knew you were autistic 13 years before you did, Jimmy Neutron. I have an IQ of 140, and yet I still play Pokemon. Of course there's something wrong with me! Though the DS's Brain Age sold better than Big Brain Academy, the one thing Brain Age sorely lacked was character and personality, which Academy simply oozes with. Instead of Brain Age's generally dry approach, Brain Academy is full of colorfully animated iconography and charming character designs that bring it to life. It's a perfectly welcoming atmosphere for players of all ages to casually step into without feeling intimidated. Sure, the minigames are all wonderfully iconographic, aiding the speedy solution-based gameplay, but what I really love are the awkwardly drawn finger puppet people. What? I mean, just look at this guy! Like, what's up with his neck? Maybe he's depressed or has a physical impairment. The professor's line work even jiggles like he's straight out of Ed, Edd n Eddy. And you have the higher score than me?
This game looks silly and I like it.
In every household everywhere, siblings bicker in their eternal argument of, "You're stupid, no you're stupid," until their parent mistakenly purchases the very means of settling that argument.
That is not what I meant by story.
Oh, what?
Yeah, now what?
There is an equal amount of story in this game as there are ants in fruit salad.
What?
As you can see, there is no N required to spell ants inside of the fruit salad.
That's the stupidest.
There is, however, rust in the fruit salad.
There is no story.
Do I spy a fart in the fruit salad?
Stop!
Okay, so I wanted to point this out before with the graphics, but the wonderful sound effects and background music is what ties this whole game's personality together in a big happy bow.
It's also got an awesome remix track in Super Smash Bros. So now you can crush your siblings' willpower after crushing their self-esteem, all under the same theme like a laugh track to their own despair.
I didn't have a very happy childhood, does that show?
Like a fart in a fruit salad.
This is basically a game of mini-games for people who would play WarioWare were it not for all the farts and nose-picking.
I only wish that this game could have somehow clued me in on my condition after maxing out the Pentagon scoreboard for the 100th time. Like, wow, you're really smart. I think you should see a doctor.
A weird side effect of this game is in realizing that your parents really aren't that smart at all. I mean, come on, Dad! You barely have a score better than my little brother and sister!
Actually, the side effect is your ego inflating to the factor of a hot air balloon.
I'm really good at 15 minigames, therefore I'm intellectually superior than all of you!
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you're playing it wrong.
The positive gamer in me was surprised with how much I liked Big Brain Academy with a 6 out of 10. It was a lot of fun challenging others to beat their scores, all the while the game itself doing its magic and training you to think faster and more advanced ways for problem solving. However, it is unlikely that I'll be digging it out to play anytime soon.
The critical gamer in me is impressed enough to give Big Brain Academy a solid 8 out of 10. Rating it based on what it set out to achieve, I think it did an excellent job of creating a series of brain-stimulating minigames in a fun, approachable way. And I'm very happy to see it alive and well with a release on the Nintendo Wii, and more recently in the upcoming installment on the Switch.
Wow, Hamster, you're so relevant!
Actually, it was a Patreon request.
Well, what do you think? Tell us how your positive and critical sides rate Big Brain Academy in the comments below.
But if you're only playing these games to assert your intellectual dominance over your family members,
Then you're totally doing it right!
no! You're just playing with yourself.
Oh, please don't let this be the last 2D Metroid game I get to review!
Nintendo does like making Metroid games about as much as the cat likes drowning in sulfuric acid.
Make me regret the drowning cat joke, Nintendo!
Well, let's just hope that the next one isn't another decade and a half wait.
Now it's been 2 decades,
Can we please get a Metroid 5?
and it revitalized the franchise and prepared it for more great games to come. Right, Nintendo? Please?
But if you're still holding out hope that Nintendo hasn't forgotten about Metroid 5,
Don't say it!
then you're just playing with yourself.
Then you're just playing with yourself.
5. Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my god! It's Metroid 5! Oh my god!
What's happening?
Metro, oh my god! What the hell? What the hell? It's real! Metroid Dread is real! Oh my god!
How long has it been? How long has this been?
Oh my god!
After nearly 20 years of silence, Metroid 5 is finally a reality. And not only is it Metroid 5, the story arc finale that originated on the NES and was last seen on the Game Boy Advance, but it's Metroid Dread. The fabled lost DS game from 2005, trapped in development hell and cursed to never see the light of day until now. This game's sheer existence is truly historic, and the best part is, not only are gamers finally appreciating Metroid after decades of it laying dormant, but so is Nintendo. This is the first Metroid game to ever get nearly this much media attention, promotional material, and advertising as Nintendo's front and center full-blown holiday title. Not to mention its enormous critical success, as it gets showered in nearly perfect scores across the board. The game has and continues to top the charts in video game sales in nearly all markets like Amazon, retailers, and even the Nintendo eShop all around the world. This isn't just Metroid 5. It's not just Metroid Dread. This is a massive resurgence where millions of new fans are discovering the true king of the genre for the very first time. Metroid is finally back, and it's here to stay. And I get to play it? Metroid Dread is a real video game that you can play with your real fingers and eyeballs.
I think I'm gonna cry.
You just might, it's actually pretty terrifying.
Wait, what?
I can't even believe I get to say this. Metroid Dread is a 2D action platformer about exploration, finding and procuring power-ups, and using those new abilities to access new environments and challenge various bosses. Yeah, it's called Metroidvania for a reason. Mercury Steam, the team behind Samus Returns, is back for Dread, taking a lot of their knowledge from the previous Metroid title and refining it into a highly polished, action-packed epic experience. The melee counter is back, but with a huge upgrade. Gone are the days of stopping, waiting, and countering everything. Now you can counter while running, jumping, and even sliding, and enemies are also far more tenacious, making counters much more difficult, preventing the mechanic from affecting the game's pace while adding a ton of satisfying, seamless action. The Aeon Gauge also makes its return from Samus Returns, and with its own quirks ironed out, now your Aeon charges its own kinetic energy as Samus moves, so you don't have to grind to fill it up anymore. Also, the new Aeon abilities you get this time are just amazing. Samus can temporarily go invisible with the new Phantom Cloak, allowing her to avoid the detection of the game's many terrifying pursuing enemy units. Even if Samus depletes her Aeon Gauge, she can still remain invisible at the cost of her own draining HP. She can even move while invisible, however, at the cost of even more Aeon or HP. But it can be a lifesaver and definitely adds a tremendous amount of tension when escaping an enemy. Shelving the enemy for now, her second ability is the Flash Shift, allowing Samus to teleport in up to 3 short burst dashes horizontally. Not only is this incredibly useful in both combat as well as exploration, my requirements for a great Metroidvania ability, but it's also super fun to use. Seriously, you just feel amazing whenever you just blink around the room. And lastly, Samus's scan ability, the Pulse Radar, makes a return, but with a nifty time-saving overhaul. Since there's no need to worry about running out of Aeon anymore, Samus can quickly scan areas and easily uncover the path forward, as well as hunt down any elusive missile and health expansions. Speaking of which, missiles and energy tanks both got quite a creative overhaul. Now, missile tanks can be found in either packs of 2 or 10. This way, the larger packs can be hidden in more creative and challenging ways, and the easy 2 packs can be scattered all over the map in countless hiding spots, so you're always getting stronger. Even the energy tanks were all restructured. Instead of finding extra reserve tanks that filled your health upon death and kinda killed the pace of the fight you were in, you can now find energy parts as well as the usual energy tanks. When you find 4 energy parts, you'll assemble a whole energy tank. It's an amazing way to hide even more goodies and have players working towards something without really changing much at all. Even the Space Jump got this treatment with the new Spin Boost, an in-between upgrade where Samus can effectively double jump before getting the full-blown Space Jump ability. I really like this idea of slowly allowing the player to grow stronger and find new abilities with the promise of even more to come later down the line. Samus also gets the Spider Magnet, allowing her to climb along walls and ceilings, ride conveyors, and even shoot while doing so. It's a fixed climbing ability from Fusion without the weird monkey bar logic, and a fixed spider ball that doesn't slow down the pace one bit. It's great. There's also a lot of quality of life improvements, like how Samus just starts with the power grip and gets a dedicated button for the grapple beam. Her diffusion beam can now blast through walls. She doesn't even need to jump over raised ground, but instead will automatically and acrobatically keep running over it. And the Morph Ball and Spring Ball get combined so you can jump in Morph Ball form right away.
There's also the modified Seeker missile from Prime 2, now dubbed the Storm Missile, allowing Samus to charge a burst of 3 mini-missiles that can simultaneously auto-aim at up to 5 targets. It's an amazingly satisfying tool for boss fights and accessing specific puzzles. There's also a new charge upgrade for the Morph Ball bombs called the Cross Bomb, a Bomberman-style cross explosion that not only knocks out extra blocks, but also propels Samus from the direction of the blast. And of course, you can once again free aim in any direction. But this time you can also control your aim a little while you run with precise movements of the analog stick. I cannot stress enough that Samus has never felt this good to control. She's so versatile this time that a lot of the game's Speed Booster and Shine Spark puzzles are pretty daunting until you get a good grasp on what to do and how fluidly Samus moves. You'll be shocked at what kind of crazy stuff she can pull off this time. Like quick killing bosses? Kraid can be defeated incredibly easily if you manage to get the Morph Ball bombs early and blast into his insides and end him right away. There's also a later boss that can be Shine Sparked into and defeated instantly. It's like Super Metroid's secret boss takedowns all over again, and I love it! You can even counter those bosses at precise moments in order to attack mid-cutscene and watch as you utterly annihilate them in full-blown cinematic fashion. Sure, you feel like an unstoppable space bounty hunter acrobatically and effortlessly destroying everything in your path. But remember, this is Metroid Dread, and throughout nearly half of every map in the game, you'll be trespassing into an Emmy zone, where you'll be hunted down by a terrifying cybernetic killing machine. Emmy zones are large and horrifying. If you thought the SAX was scary from Fusion, try a real AI actively roaming the same map you are, constantly listening and following the sounds of your footsteps, taking shortcuts, and absolutely gunning for you with full force when it does spot you, locking off the escape hatches until you manage to dodge its pursuit or die in its clutches. If you're ever caught by an Emmy, you'll get a fraction of a second to attempt to counter its fatal attack. If you manage it, you'll get another chance to escape. But if you whiff, it's game over. And get used to seeing that screen a lot in this game, because the Emmy will get you. It's only a matter of time. However, unlike past Metroid titles, there's a generous checkpoint system, so dying to an Emmy or a boss isn't so bad, even if you've been neglecting saving. It's just encouraging enough to keep you trying until you do succeed, instead of forcing you back to a save point and taking away whatever upgrades you found along the way to your death. You can, however, defeat an Emmy by finding its central unit hidden deep in the Emmy zone. You'll challenge a Mother Brain style mini-boss, complete with Rinkas from the original game, and absorb its weird blue magical juice, temporarily upgrading your arm cannon into an overpowered laser cannon capable of blowing up even an Emmy, otherwise impervious to all attacks. But even with this ridiculously strong upgrade, you'll still need to lure the Emmy into a long enough straightaway to properly overheat their faceplate with rapid shots before charging up a full blast to destroy the head. The camera even shifts to a third-person shot during these moments, making these final bursts of revenge all the more satisfying. Now, without spoiling anything specific, the bosses in this game are all amazing thrill rides. Each one shakes up the fight with various phases in line with the series' best, where it's not as simple as just shooting them until they die. You need to figure them out to survive, especially when the game starts throwing multiples of previous bosses your way, forcing you to adapt and showcase your new strength. A lot of players might find the massive open maps to be a little daunting, and to that I've got to say the beginning of this game does a great job at keeping things linear, while still making the player believe that what they're doing is exploring themselves. And once they've demonstrated that they can understand the basics of item acquisition and exploration, the game lets go and allows for all sorts of possibilities for how the player can proceed. You've also got access to teleporters coming back from Samus Returns. However, thankfully nerfed this time, where colored teleporters can only transport you to the other matching teleporter on another map. It's more like a shortcut mechanic rather than the arguably broken fast travel mechanic. I think it adds a tremendous amount to the game in this fixed format. There's also a lot of other really cool stuff we'd rather not spoil here, but what we can say is you once again can unlock gallery content in the main menu after getting 100% item completion, as well as beating the game fast enough for both difficulties. And fortunately, once you unlock a gallery image, your save file permanently has it unlocked, so you can focus your subsequent runs on aiming for different endings without worrying about the other stipulations like getting 100% items again. There's so much here that's learned so much from the past and found new innovative and effective ways to keep the gameplay familiar but also fresh and challenging that it's not an understatement in the slightest to say that this is possibly the greatest Metroid gameplay we've ever seen. And that's saying a lot. Considering the last game was on Game Boy Advance, you could say that jumping to full HD graphics was a bit of a huge deal. It's been 19 years, Bomb. Aside from this being the first HD Metroid, running at a smooth 60 frames per second, the actual aesthetics they went for with this game is just incredible. Samus, the creatures, all the beautifully animated environments all look so real and well illustrated. Everything is so well refined that pretty much any random screenshot looks like a work of art. Samus's new suit designs are amazing. The Emmy and new bosses are incredible and welcome additions to the world of Metroid. Even the background creatures and plant life all lend the notion that this is a fully living ecosystem existing in this universe. Most importantly, this game looks and feels like an authentic Metroid game, even after a 19-year absence. So yeah, this is probably the best looking Metroid game we've ever seen. And that is also saying a lot. Now this is gonna be a dicey section since we highly encourage you to play the game yourself. If you want to go in totally blind, then here's your spoiler skip timestamp. But before playing the game, I'd still highly encourage either playing the first 4 entries or familiarizing yourself with our reviews of Metroid 1 on the NES, Metroid 2 Samus Returns for the 3DS, Metroid 3 Super for the SNES, and Metroid 4 Fusion for the GBA's shameless plug to the 4th power. The Galactic Federation receives anonymous video footage depicting a living X-parasite originating from the planet ZDR. After dispatching 7 Emmy units to the planet in order to validate the footage, they all mysteriously go offline. With no other choice, Samus is called in to investigate the X and rogue Emmys. Soon after arriving on ZDR, Samus takes a long elevator down to the depths of the planet, temporarily losing contact with Adam, her AI companion, acting as her liaison between her and the Galactic Federation. It's here where Samus gets ambushed by a living Chozo warrior, whose unrivaled skill and firepower quickly gets the better of her, and she blacks out right before her imminent doom and wakes up alone in her power suit, devoid of nearly all of her upgrades. Samus soon comes across various navigation rooms on ZDR that allow her to communicate with Adam, who provides a cold and analytical view of the situation, and advice for Samus's best chances for survival. Luckily this time Adam is much less of a burden, no longer locking off the player from exploring, and no longer blatantly telling Samus where to go. While exploring ZDR, Samus meets the benevolent Chozo scientist Quiet Robe, who just after saving the bounty hunter from being killed by an Emmy, kinda drops an info bomb. Quiet Robe reveals that the Chozo warrior from earlier is known as Ravenbeak, the commander of the Malkin tribe, whereas Quiet Robe is of the Thoha tribe from SR-388, who was responsible for creating the Metroids in order to exterminate the X-parasites that infested the planet. Ravenbeak led an army of Malkin to SR-388 and slaughtered the Thoha, sparing only Quiet Robe as his lead scientist in order to control the Metroids and create a powerful enough army to conquer the galaxy. Well, that was his plan until Samus kinda did that whole alien genocide thing. After returning to ZDR, Ravenbeak discovered that one of his own Chozo warriors was actually an X-parasite in disguise. He quickly quarantined the impending outbreak and schemed how he could use the X to lure Samus to ZDR, as after she was infected with an X herself, she became the sole living possessor of Metroid DNA in the galaxy. Ravenbeak then overpowered and hacked the Emmy sent by the Galactic Federation, reprogramming them to mercilessly hunt down Samus and extract her Metroid DNA, which I totally called as the Emmy's directive pre-launch, by the way. Almost immediately after opening the path forward for Samus, Quiet Robe is backstabbed by a robot Chozo soldier and dies. Samus is left alone to fight off the cybernetic Chozo warriors, hunting her down and find a way to end Ravenbeak's scheme herself. But her investigation leads her to Ellen, the very place where Ravenbeak quarantined the X-parasites, which then immediately escape and infect every living thing on the entire planet. Yeah, this planet's getting blown up. Can we just stop and acknowledge that the developers had to create the entire world of ZDR, some areas even changing their climates multiple times throughout the game, and then change every single enemy's mechanics, looks, and fighting capabilities to faithfully bring back the X-parasites from Fusion across the entire map?
This planet is so getting blown up. And X even possesses the corpse of Quiet Robe, which then reactivates the final Emmy that nearly killed Samus earlier. However, when she finally confronts it, she unleashes a strange new power by violently grabbing its head and sucking its energy dry. You thought you had one last Emmy to deal with, but little did you realize that Samus was getting so strong that she could literally toss it aside like it was nothing. In terms of gameplay, this could be a little disappointing, but for the sake of the narrative subversion showcasing what's happening to Samus, I find this move to be totally worth it. Adam reveals that this ability originates from Samus fully awakening her dormant Metroid DNA and truly becoming the physical embodiment of the last Metroid. That, and alongside her Chozo DNA, the Thoha genes help her keep the Metroid side in check, and the Malkin genes giving her astounding physical prowess. However, when she storms Ravenbeak's mothership, Itarash, it becomes clear that this awakening was Ravenbeak's plan all along, in order to manipulate Samus's dormant DNA in order to turn her into the ultimate warrior, and after killing her, use her genes to clone her into an unstoppable army, as she's since become even more powerful than any single Metroid has ever become before. It also becomes clear that the navigation rooms were in fact not linking Samus to Adam, but Ravenbeak posing as the AI in order to subject Samus to the maximum amount of stress and challenge on planet ZDR in order to instigate this awakening. I am getting so many Metal Gear Solid vibes. Samus then faces off against the insanely overpowered Chozo warrior, but inevitably fails to match his strength. As it looks like the last light is about to fade from Samus, she lets out a furious rage, smashing her hand into Ravenbeak's face, sucking his alongside the entire ship's energy in one violent clash, transforming her living suit in the process. Now fully awakened, Samus's living suit has become the Metroid suit, and gets an immediate chance to try out its full power, as Ravenbeak shambles out of the wreckage of his fallen warship. An X-Parasite surprises him from the back and transforms him into a massive amalgamation of all the past bosses on ZDR in a final effort to kill Samus, who utterly annihilates him and the X with one ludicrously huge blast of energy. So, of course, the planet is set to explode, leaving Samus little time to escape the wreckage and make it back to her ship on time. And by the way, this is your beam now! Oh my god, it's like the ending to Super Metroid all over again, except somehow even more epic and overpowered! But before she activates her ship, Adam warns Samus that by touching the controls, she'd siphon the ship of its energy. Then the X-infected body of Quiet Robe slowly emerges from the shadows behind her, yet somehow overcomes its mind control and submits to Samus, allowing her to absorb him, reverting her suit back to normal just in time for her to escape the planet's detonation. So just to recap, Samus is part Metroid, part Thoha Chozo scientist to control Metroids, part Malkin Chozo for supernatural physical strength and reflexes, and now part sentient parasitic alien bird corpse? Is there any room left in there for part human anymore? I kinda think that's the point. Also, during the final confrontation, Ravenbeak reveals that he was actually the DNA donor for Samus's Malkin DNA, referring to her as his daughter. However, this only makes Samus's retaliation against this assertive conquest all the more personal. So yeah, Yoshio Sakamoto really meant it when he said that Dread is the ending of the 5-game story arc he'd been working on since the NES. It's a slow spiral of Samus slowly understanding and eventually becoming the very thing she set out to destroy. But where could the series possibly go from here? I don't know, but if the next game starts with Samus locked away in a Galactic Federation prison, they better lead with, "The last Metroid is in captivity. The galaxy..." No! Metroid always has killer soundtracks. But did nearly 20 years of separation from the last games and this fresh new talent cause any departure in quality from what we've grown to expect from Metroid? Nope. Yeah, no, not at all. Each environmental and battle theme carries its own feeling and weight of the situation. There's so many great tracks and instant classics that I've been listening to this entire OST on loop for days now, and it's still just as great as when I heard it the first time. I especially love that Kraid's theme is a reimagination of the mini-boss theme from Super Metroid that plays during his confrontation. Ridley ended up stealing the main boss theme for himself in all the other games, so it's only fair that Kraid snags what was rightfully his as well. And as for the rare moments of voice acting, I gotta admit, I was really scared of how the game would handle this, but it's all done so perfectly that all my worries were fortunately over nothing. Adam sounds frighteningly cold and mechanical, adding to the loneliness that already permeates the game. And the
other voices in the game are all so well performed and all in the newly invented Chozo spoken language, further adding to this eerie authenticity. Plus all the new sound effects are extra clean, missiles are extra crunchy, beams are extra pew-pewy, and all the background environmental roars and screeches just sound so atmospheric. And if you want to talk about musical dominance, just walk into an Emmy room and let the music alone send a chill up your spine before it gets impaled. Oh look, yet another section where we basically admit that Dread is like all Metroid games past, but even better. Do you see where this is going?
Are we really doing this?
I think we're doing this! My favorite video game I've ever played is Super Metroid. So what am I supposed to say now that this game comes along and straight up does everything Super Metroid does, but better? This game truly looks, sounds, and plays like a passion project that had 19 years to focus and refine its ideas and design framework. When do we even get the chance to see a game with nearly 2 decades of care and attention put into it? What should we expect next? Mother 4? With so many Metroidvania games releasing nowadays, it's surprising to see one stand apart as vastly superior to the general lot of indie imitators. There truly is only one Metroid. This isn't just a single video game, it's a landmark in gaming history. This is the conclusion of possibly the longest running canon in the entire medium, beginning with the NES Classic in 1986, and the bonuses in the special edition don't let you forget it. Did we even mention that all the music is directed by Kenji Yamamoto, the same guy who's been behind the series' melodies since Super Metroid? How about the fact that you can see Samus's facial expressions through her visor at various points in the game, driving home the emotion of the scenes with minimal dialogue? Or the fact that the intro cinematics catch you up to speed on everything you need to know to fully grasp the story with HD recreations of original artwork from the past games? Or that Samus has some of the most character-defining cutscenes she's ever had, showcasing her unstoppable, silent, and defiant attitude in fully interactive cutscenes where you can counter and lay waste to her enemies as the action unfolds? I honestly think this might be the best Metroid game ever made! Yeah. The positive gamer in me had such high hopes going into Metroid Dread. Yet somehow, even those lofty expectations were shattered with this undeniable 10 out of 10 experience. From beginning to end, I was fully engrossed in the hypnotic pseudo-horror action exploration adventure as I ventured to escape planet ZDR. Dread is an easy recommendation and an absolute must-buy for fans of the Metroidvania genre. The critical gamer in me is struggling to not only accept that Metroid Dread exists, but that it's also as impressively finely tuned as it is, evolving it up to a 10 out of 10. Take it from someone who plays a lot of Metroid games and can find faults in nearly all of them. This game is phenomenal. Rarely do we see landmark mainline entries that end up being anywhere near this level. Zelda got its Breath of the Wild, Mario got his Odyssey, and Metroid got its fifth game. That didn't come out right at all, did it? Well, not quite. But what do you think? Is Metroid Dread really one of the best Metroid games ever made? Tell us how your positive and critical sides rate Metroid Dread in the comments below. But if you're under the misguided delusion that this game somehow isn't worth $60, then you should probably stop making a fool of yourself on the internet, 'cause you're just playing with yourself. Buy Metroid Dread.